The CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted by CyberEars. If you're serious about your podcast hosting needs, you should check out CyberEars. Whether you are a podcaster, a radio host, a musician, a narrator, an audiobook author, or simply a school, church, corporation, or anyone else with an audio recording that needs to be hosted or distributed, you should check out cyberears.com. Unlimited bandwidth, fast, reliable, and rugged servers with no hidden fees. CyberEars. Your audio, your terms.
Listen. It's getting closer.
Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet? Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet?
You're listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast, a delicious adventure into the world of retro computing news and information featuring the Tandy Color Computer. All right. Well, welcome back. This is episode 12 of the CoCo Crew Podcast. I am John Linville.
And Neil Blanchard.
And we're joined by Neil Blanchard, of course. And we are the CoCo Crew. So we are maybe not fresh off CoCo Fest. We have recently been to CoCo Fest and then took a little bit of a short break. We're probably back closer to our regular schedule. We kind of had pushed up our releases of the past couple of episodes, trying to get episode 11 out before CoCo Fest. We did that, and now we're back. So we're back with episode 12. Now, I guess that means next episode will be episode 13. That sounds a little unlucky. I wonder, maybe we'll have to skip that, go straight to 14. I don't know. Maybe we'll do that. Maybe not. So anyway, it's our new year for us. Hooray. So that means, of course, that CoCo Fest is now 11 months away.
11 months, that doesn't sound bad.
Well, we made it through the past year. I think we'll make it through another one. And so, here we go again. It's another year in the hobby, new projects, maybe with some new friends, maybe return to old projects. I don't know. We'll have any number of things that we can do. There might be changes to the podcast. This one's going to be a little bit different with a roundtable discussion with a few extra folks and even a guest tech segment. I don't think either of those are going to be permanent changes, but we might have other changes coming. But like I say, new year, not quite a new podcast, but new year, new attitude maybe. What do you think? Neil, what are you working on these days?
I'm working on the joypad adapters.
You have a number of orders there? Are you still selling off your stock you built up before CoCo Fest, or are you building new ones?
Selling off the stock, but getting pretty close. I have 3 left now.
Yeah, so you will still produce more.
Yes.
Yeah, I've gotten. I'm down on most of my stock. I have some. I have a couple of more Xmas Rush available, and a few Farfall, and I've already had to make some new Follow CoCo carts when people bought my triple threat package. Like I say, it's fun. It's nice to have something to offer the community. Nice to sell some of these carts. We need to get some more cartridges available from some other authors out there besides just me and John Strong. We've been trying to recruit a few folks. Some people have been easier to work with than others. But I don't know. We hope to have some available through someone before too long. But, we'll just have to wait and see. Don't want to pre-announce anything. Beyond that, I haven't really done much. I kind of had a little bit of the CoCo Fest blues. Kind of always have a little bit of a stupor after I get back from CoCo Fest after regroup and reorganize, relax, and then settle back into some new projects.
Yeah, I had the same thing this year myself.
Yeah, it's just it's a little bit of extended travel, and then it's a whirlwind weekend. It kind of leaves your head spinning a little bit, but definitely fun, and definitely one of the best CoCo Fests I can remember having.
For sure.
So I think CoCo Fest definitely was a big success this year. We had, what was the number, 83 people. That was a big jump in attendance. We had more time in the venue in the evenings, and we had dinner catered in. A nice barbecue place. It was just great. It was a great event. Lots of new faces. People hanging out in the lobby of the hotel after hours, hanging out and talking cocoa. It was a great experience. How about eBay? You doing anything on eBay or anything like that recently?
No, I haven't been doing much on eBay.
No,
but on the local sites, checking out the stuff in the area. Like we have Kijiji here, which is kind of like
right.
Craigslist.
Yeah, I've gotten just back to sort of my usual cadence there. I picked up the cassette of high-res screen print utilities that was just selling pretty cheap. I don't know how useful it is, but it might be something fun to hook up the CGP 220 if I can manage to get some ink for that. Anyway, one other thing I got was this popped up in Glenn Vandenbigler's site. It's a set of photocopies, but it's a bunch of documentation, kind of behind the scenes, like specs and such, related to the Project Green Thumb, which, if you remember from some of our earlier discussions, Green Thumb was the project between Motorola and Tandy and the U.S. Department of Agriculture that ultimately was a project to get what you might nowadays call an information appliance out into the hands of farmers. But the hardware there was sort of an early user of the 6847 video display generator and was sort of a predecessor, indirectly perhaps, to what eventually became the Tandy color computer. So it's a neat little collection of documentation, supposedly passed to some unknown party as a set of photocopies sent from a Tandy engineer. It's still not quite as detailed as I would like. Of course, I'd love to have a schematic and dump of the EPROMs and that sort of thing. It does have a fair amount of not quite technical specifications, but a fair amount of detail. It uncovers actually the processor for the device is spec'd as it's basically the Fairchild F8 compatible processor, which apparently was second source available through Motorola. And also shows a picture which seems to indicate that the case for Project Green Thumb was essentially the same plastic case as the TRS-80 Model 1. So that's a neat little factoid.
Interesting. I did not know that.
But yeah, if it's not the same, it looks quite a bit. It looks the same to me. It's just that instead of a keyboard, they've got a panel with basically a 16 key pad, similar to a telephone. So anyway, that's a neat little piece of history. It's, like I say, it's photocopy, so it's not quite originals, but it's pretty close to having some original documents.
When do you ever see stuff like that even come up? That's amazing you got that.
Yeah. So I need to figure out how to scan it and make that available, which is not currently in my repertoire of skills, but we'll have to figure that out. How about any treasures from CoCo Fest? You pick anything up there at CoCo Fest you'd like to talk about?
I did. I was able to luckily win at the auction the Ears cartridge pack, the speech pack.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And I ordered from speaking of Glenn. He had the cassette software for it. That's going to be kind of neat. Try
cool.
that out.
Yeah, I in the auction there, I won one of those posters that John Strong had produced for his Bomb Squad game. I think I paid more at the auction than what he would have sold it to sold it to me for at his table. But all proceeds go to the club, so that's good.
Yeah, supports Glenn's side.
Let's see, what else did I get? Well, I got some kind of funky Sega joystick adapter. That was kind of cool. And a couple other things here and there. It was a pretty good year. I don't have all my stuff laid out, so I can't really remember too much stuff to remember. I did get a cool T-shirt with my picture on it and yours.
Those were pretty neat.
And I got a Fuzix T-shirt from Brett Gordon. That was pretty cool. So, well, that's probably enough chitter-chatter to start off the episode. Why don't we take a little break here, and we'll be back with some announcements.
Okay, but why Tandy Computers? In a word, quality. We do it all, from custom-designed semiconductors to the finished product. Tandy business computers are manufactured in our own USA plants. We test and retest and test again to ensure one of the highest standards of quality in the industry. And Radio Shack provides total service and support. I'm convinced.
Tandy Computers at Radio Shack Computer Centers. In business for business.
Okay, we're back. And now it's time for some announcements. We are the CoCo Crew Podcast, and we are available on Twitter as at CoCo Crew Podcast, all one word together. If you want to see our occasional witty tweets or exchanges between the trash talkers or other retro themed folks, if you like to tweet on the Twitter, then come and check us out. We are also available with a Facebook group called the CoCo Crew Podcast, and that has spaces between all the words. So if you are a Facebooker, come and check out that group. You can occasionally see a few pictures posted, tantalizing hints at future projects and that sort of thing. Of course, we are available through iTunes. We're available for streaming on Stitcher, and we're also available through the new Google Play podcast service. I was noticing some of our statistics for downloads, and we had been topping out closer to 500 downloads on most of our episodes, and then all of a sudden we were topping out closer to 700 downloads, and that took me a while, but I kind of figured out, that was about the same time that Google Play finally got their podcast thing working, so maybe we got an extra couple of hundred downloads through Google Play. So that's kind of cool if that's what it worked out, or maybe I'm just imagining things.
It gets us a lot more traffic.
Well, let's hope. We are, of course, a member of the Throwback Network. The Throwback Network is a collection of retro-themed podcasts, many of which are related to retro technology, computers from the past, retro gaming, and a variety of other kind of 80s era topics, including the Greatest American Hero television show and a few other wistful memories of the past. We're also listed as part of the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. That listing of podcasts is, of course, almost exclusively technology-oriented, of course, because it relates to video games. But there's listings there for podcasts related to the Fairchild Channel F, the Magnavox Odyssey 2, Intellivision, Atari, the Sega, us, of course, Sony PlayStation, even arcade stuff. If any of that sounds exciting, then you may want to check out the link in the show notes. Audio for the CoCo Crew Podcast is, of course, hosted by Cyber Ears. We have a little advertising for Cyber Ears in our intro, but if you are looking to have your own podcast or to host audio files for whatever reason, then I would advise that you do at least check out the offerings from Cyber Ears. They certainly have been very friendly and helpful to us. Beyond that, if you want to reach the show for some feedback or to ask a question or whatever, you can reach both Neil and I through the following addresses. We have a show at cococrew.org, podcast at cococrew.org, or feedback at cococrew.org. So use whichever one seems appropriate to you or whichever one you can remember. And if for some reason you want to reach just one of us, I'm available as John, John, at CoCoCrew.org, and Neil is available through Neil, Neil, at CoCoCrew.org. So that's all of our standard announcements. And then we also like to keep everyone aware of some upcoming real-life events that might be of interest to our listeners. So first up is the Southern Fried Game Room Expo 2016. This event is being held in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Renaissance Atlanta Waverly. Sounds like a nice place. On June 10th through 12th.
Are you checking that one out?
Well, I'm interested in going. I have not made plans. My wife has got some plans for traveling to see some family around that time. It's also around her birthday. So it's a little bit tricky scheduling it.
Yeah.
I might go and check it out, but I haven't quite planned yet. Sounds like a busy event, so I might not be able to at this point. But we'll see. I would like to take part in it. It sounds like a fun event. It covers retro gaming, both living room gaming and arcade gaming, and even paper on the desk kind of gaming. So it sounds like a cool event to me. Anyway, that's June 10th through 12th, 2016 in Atlanta, Georgia. And let's see, the next event up is K-Fest or Kansas Fest. Kansas Fest is an event, and in fact, it's really kind of a summer camp for geeks, or Apple II geeks. It's actually held in the dorm room at Rockhurst University in, I guess that's Kansas City, Missouri. And it is a pretty cool event. It's a multi-day. I think it's 4 or 5 days. Well, let's see. What does it say? It's July 19th through the 24th. I think that's probably a Tuesday through Sunday. And it's kind of a cool event. You stay in the dorms, and it's 24 hours. You hang out together, you eat together in the student cafeteria. There's usually events to watch old movies together. There's technical sessions. I went to this last year. I was very impressed by the level of coverage in the technical sessions, and some of the sessions were, less technical, but still interesting from a retro computing, retro geek kind of person. So, for example, some of the proposals they're citing for this year is there's one automated verification of copy-protected disk images. That sounds kind of technical.
I'd like to be a part of that.
Picking apart the 2C Plus ROM definitely sounds pretty technical. But then they've also got silicon molding and resin casting small parts. That sounds right up my alley. Not really technical, more of a arts and crafts kind of thing. So anyway, Kansas Fest gets plenty of coverage on other retro computing podcasts, so I don't think we need to go into too much more detail on that, but it's a cool event. If you have an interest at all, if your interests cover the Apple II or any of the other Apple computers of that era, you definitely should consider making your way to Rockhurst to join them. Moving on, we have the Vintage Computer Festival West 11. First time we've had a Vintage Computer Festival event on the West Coast in a number of years, I believe. And so this is being held August 6th and 7th at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California. Looks like they have exhibits, planning for some kind of speakers, although they don't have them listed on the website yet. Should be a nice event. It's under the auspices of the relatively newly formed Vintage Computer Federation, which was formed basically out of what was previously the March or Mid-Atlantic Retro Computing History. I think that's what it stood for. A group that was basically the people who are producing VCF East, and for whatever reason, they kind of reorganized and then have sort of taken over the VCF mantle. So they own both the VCF East and West events now, as well as the Vintage Computing Forums is also under their mantle now. There are still a couple of other Vintage Computer Festival events that have that name but aren't directly under the control of that thing, that organization yet. Or maybe never. Anyway, if you're interested in vintage computing and you are on the west coast of the United States, especially in the Silicon Valley area, I highly recommend you go and check it out. if nothing else, just so you have a chance to check out the Computer History Museum, even though they don't have a CoCo on display.
I have to fix that.
Yeah, they do have a dragon, but they don't have a CoCo. So that was a minor nit for me. And had so much other stuff, but no CoCo. I'm not sure how that happened. If you happen to be with the Computer History Museum and are listening, and you need somebody to provide a actual CoCo for you, well, do feel free to contact me, and I will see what I can work out. Again, that was August 6th and 7th, 2016, out in Mountain View, California. The next event, Vintage Computing Festival Midwest 11. This is being held September 10th through 11th of 2016. Out at the Chicago area, the Elk Grove Village, Illinois. This is another vintage computing event with exhibits and presentations planned, although I don't see any listed yet. The backbone of the organization that puts this on comes out of a Commodore group, so I think they have a little bit heavy Commodore participation. Though I don't think they bite. I think Neil survived going to the event, so. So what did you think, Neil? You liked that event, right?
Yeah, I had a fun time. It was good. Lots of Commodore there, like you said, but there was other platforms as well.
Cool. Very good. But so anyway, if you are in the Chicago area and you are still recovering from CoCo Fest, but by September you'll be ready for another event. You may want to check out VCF Midwest, unless we manage to get a Tandy event somewhere in the world by then. No. Not trying to take away from the VCF Midwest folks. Definitely check them out. Okay, here's another event that I would love to go to. I have been sort of had it on the back burner for a couple of years, but have never quite managed to get out there. But if you are on the West Coast, specifically in the Pacific Northwest, there is the Portland Retro Gaming Expo. This, of course, is in Portland, Oregon, scheduled for October 21st through the 23rd of 2016. This event covers a lot of video game activity. I think it includes arcade. I'm not 100% sure. It definitely covers consoles. Yeah, I don't know. They definitely have a website, so you can figure out. Yeah, what says right here, arcade. So there must be some arcade stuff in there as well. And they'll have exhibitors and presenters, whatever. So it's again, I've heard a lot about this on various other podcasts. Sounds like a great event. If you are in the Pacific Northwest, then including if you're in the Vancouver area of Canada, make your way down to Portland and check it out. I think it'd be a very cool event to attend. Okay, and then of course that brings us to the 26th annual Last Chicago CoCo Fest, which has already been planned for April 22nd and 23rd of 2017. I know the organizers have already been in touch with the hotel there at Heron Point, and they already have things laid out and reserved. It's already up on their website. They even, I think, already have the special room rate on the website. So very cool, very exciting stuff. If you somehow did not make it out to the 25th annual Last Chicago CoCo Fest this year, let me tell you what, you missed it. That was a good event. Like I said earlier, they're probably the best CoCo Fest that certainly the best one I can remember. Probably the best one I've ever been to. Maybe the best one ever, at least since they became CoCo Fest and not Rainbow Fest. But again, it's a great event. Lots of camaraderie, lots of good technical content in the presentations, lots of new products available. I think we cover some of that, the new products in our roundtable.
I also heard the keynote was pretty good too.
There's a keynote that is available online. I think we have a link in the show notes for the keynote that I gave. The video's not the greatest. It sort of was, since it was the first thing recorded, they're still working out a few kinks, but better than the recordings from previous CoCo Fest, which essentially don't exist. So the 26th annual Last Chicago CoCo Fest, it is coming next April. You know, every year we get a bunch of people saying, oh, well, I just can't make it. Oh, if I had known or whatever. Well, if you're listening, you know about it. Make the decision. You can go. It's the middle of the United States. If you live in a different country, if you live in Europe or something, maybe it's a little bit of an excuse, although obviously the Chicago area airports are among the most accessible in the United States. And if you live in the United States, you can drive, or probably you could take a train. You certainly can fly. And people have the financial limitations and maybe can't go everywhere all the time. But if you really want to go to CoCo Fest, you just have to make the decision to do what it takes to get there. Tell the boss you're going. Tell the wife you're going. Set aside $20 a week or whatever, and I think you can make it there. What do you think, Neil?
Well, for sure, got 11 months to plan.
That's right.
And that is handy. That those airports, by the way, that was a good mention.
O'Hare is it's a busy airport, but it's certainly accessible from all over the world. It's really not a lot of reason not to be able to get there. It's we all do have things that come up, and like I said, not everyone is quite as flush as everyone else. But I think most people, if they really want to get there, they just have to make the decision and go. So there you go. Anyway, I think that probably covers our announcements for this month. So what do you think, Neil? You ready for a break?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, we'll be back in just a moment.
I'm in love with the CoCo. I'm in love. I'm in love with the CoCo.
All right, and now we're back with some news. We have, our usual reasonably long stack of news items. I'm not sure we're going to cover everything in the community this time, since we have a lot of stuff in the episode, and honestly, I think our news segments run a little long anyway. So hopefully, we're not skipping anything that's important. If we do miss something, send us some feedback and say, "Hey, you messed up." But anyway, we'll move on for our first item. It comes from Tim Lindner, but he's sort of just conveying some news that's kind of a buzz in the overall retro community. If you're familiar with a website called Stack Exchange, which is it's a kind of a Web 2.0 style of site that people post questions mostly about programming related topics, and then you get people who provide answers, and I guess they have systems for evaluating the answers so that you kind of build a certain amount of street cred by answering questions and that sort of thing. Anyway, Stack Exchange has, I guess, different segments available for certain kinds of topics, and the one that people have been trying to put together for a little while is a retro computer Stack Exchange to cover questions about, retro computing. And so Tim points out that this now in beta. I think it's still in beta as of now. This is in beta as of a month ago. So anyway, he was offering to give people invites if they need to get in. I don't know if you still need an invite to get in at this point or not. One way or another, if you want to check out the Retro Computer Stack Exchange, check out the questions, see if you can provide some answers. I think it's to be a good resource to have in the retro computing hobby in general, and maybe even to answer a few things like what is OS 9. It might be a good resource to have in the community. You ever use Stack Exchange, Neil?
No, but I've checked it out. You mentioned it before, and I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. I don't do a lot of. I don't use Stack Exchange a lot day to day. Sometimes when I do have a question to post related to programming or whatever, and sometimes Stack Exchange pops up in the Googling. I think, and I could be wrong, but I'm kind of a C programmer, kind of a nitty gritty sort of guy. I think a lot of the stuff on Stack Exchange is maybe some of the newer, more web oriented languages or whatever, but. Probably get some rotten tomatoes thrown at me over that, but so I don't use it a lot, but it does provide some interesting answers once in a while, and sometimes sometimes the discussions are pretty deep about, the internals of how certain compilers process certain types of statements and that sort of thing. And of course, in retrocomputing, it'll be a different set of topics, but I think it'll be a good resource. Moving on, the next item comes from Tom Seagrove, who's someone who's been in the community for a while. And so he's posted links to some video from Rainbow Fest in Chicago in 1988. So I'm not really sure where he got these videos, but he posted a couple on YouTube, which one is a live CoCo consultations from Marty Goodman with a guest appearance by Steve Bjork. And then another one is a demo of Surcomp's Window Master software. Anyway, I mean, a couple of old videos, interesting as period pieces, interesting as CoCo history. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, CoCo history, and if you just want to see Steve Bjork or Marty Goodman, you may want to check out his links.
I always like seeing stuff like this when the stuff surfaces out of nowhere. You see these old videos. It's a blast from the past.
No, it is kind of weird that just sort of came out of nowhere. But anyway, moving on to surfacing out of nowhere, we have a product announcement from Mark Marlette at Cloud9. This is something I think Neil and I both knew was coming for a while because, we're cool insiders and that sort of thing. But anyway, Mark has released a product he calls Super Espectro. Espectro is a translation of the Portuguese word for spectrum, as in light spectrum or color spectrum. And so basically what it is it's a signal converter from the RGB output on the CoCo 3 to drive a VGA monitor. And if it sounds somewhat familiar, it is based on the RGB to VGA design from Louis Antoniosi. And I guess he asked Mark to help him sort of productize the design, and Mark went all out doing so. He's got a lot of different features. You can have artifacting, and you can add scan lines. He's even got a custom Cloud9 screensaver. So
that's cool.
When you get no video output, it puts up a Cloud9 logo. It's kind of cool. It's in a nice case, power supply, and whatever. I know it takes Mark a lot of effort to put these together. I'm not sure he's actually making any money on them. But if you can get one, they sure are nice. I know I've got one. I would highly recommend them to anyone who is in need of a solution for RGB output on the CoCo 3 to drive a VGA monitor. One of the nicest options available. So we have a link to the email Mark sent to the CoCo mailing list about it. We have that link in the show notes. So check it out.
It's cool to finally be announcing this. We've been wanting to mention this for 3 months now.
Yeah, we did know it was coming for a while. So just so you know, A, so we can brag that we are in the know on things, and then B, to let you know if you are developing something, but you don't want it to get out too quick, hey, we're trustworthy. We don't let the cat out of the bag. And we might line up to buy the first one. Anyway, moving on, we have something coming out of the Dragon world from archive.worldofdragon.org. From Phil Harvey Smith, someone who's been prominent in retro computing in the Dragon world or in the UK for some time. I think I've seen him on some Acorn Atom discussions as well. Anyway, this is a Dragon MMC progress report. And so he's got a device for use with the Dragon, or presumably it works with the CoCo as well. It's another option for using SD cards or MMC cards for storage on your CoCo or Dragon. Looks like it's still sort of an ongoing project. You check the link in the show notes and read up on it. But, it's news, so that's why it's here. So certainly we wish Phil good luck and Godspeed on the project, and we hope to hear more in the future. Our next link comes from a Facebook post from Hugo Defort. So basically he looked at there's a blog post we mentioned in an earlier episode, I think, from Lee Patterson about optimizing sprite code or whatever. And so he's done some tests with some variations, and he posted a little bar chart showing the differences in some of the optimized sprite rendering techniques, including the compiled sprite, which is where you actually generate either with a compiler or even if it's hand assembled, it's still sort of the same thing. You generate code to render each sprite transition instead of just having data for what each frame looks like. But anyway, he's looked at some of these techniques and produced a chart that shows the performance differences. That's kind of interesting. Certainly leads to a lot more discussion there. Anyway, if you're curious about it, you might want to check out the link. He has a couple of other links in his listing, including referencing back not only to Lee's article, but also to the DynaSprite project. I don't know what else to say. Go check it out and see what's going on. What do you think, Neil? Were you surprised by the results there?
Oh, yeah. That's great for game development.
Yeah, well, it is. Like you say, it's good to know the numbers. Some things are worth doing. Sometimes they're not. It kind of depends. If you need the absolute best performance, certainly it's worth doing. But sometimes you don't need the absolute best performance. Sometimes you just need to move on and finish the game. Right?
Yeah, this is true.
I think that's something that a lot of people that start programming, particularly doing retro stuff, they get caught up on going to do this or that and whatever, and things don't work out, and then they stop and quit, whatever, and they don't finish a project. It's better to keep going and finish the project. And a lot of times you don't need every to squeeze everything out of it. Sometimes it's still fun. I mean, I think Xmas Rush is still fun, even though it's technologically very simple. Like I said, I don't mean to encourage you not to do your best, but sometimes doing your best by getting something out is better than having the best working code that nobody runs. Right?
Definitely.
Moving on, we have an announcement from Brett Gordon. His title is My Fourth for Fuzix, or Fuzix, however you like to pronounce it. And his subtitle, I Couldn't Help Myself. So Brett is a fan of the Forth language. If you're not familiar with Forth, well, certainly you can Google it, find it on Wikipedia. Forth is a language that's interpreted, but I'm sure that just made all the Forth people angry. So you tend to compile Forth, but you're not compiling it to actual machine code in most cases. You're kind of essentially you're tokenizing it down, but you reduce your source code to in a way that makes it very efficient to run. Anyway, Forth code by itself, it's kind of cryptic to read. It uses sort of a reverse Polish notation for the mathematics, and I don't know. It's one of those things you have to change your thinking to be able to do well with Forth, and then once you change your thinking so that you can operate well with Forth, people seem to take it as a religious conversion, and then they don't want to write with anything but Forth. So it's kind of like I used to joke about how I never wanted to play golf because everyone I knew who ever started playing golf became completely obsessed with it. So it seems like Forth is kind of like that, and people who speak out Forth seem to become completely obsessed with it. So anyway, if you're into maybe having a project that you become completely obsessed with, and especially if you're already toying with Fuzix or Fuzix, then here's a way you can have Forth running on it. So very exciting stuff, huh? Anyway, thanks, Brett, for the announcement. Okay, speaking of prolific contributors to the community who has some new announcements, Jim Geary, he's actually got a couple of things going here. So just in time for CoCo Fest, he announced the release of his Galaxy Quest text adventure. And so he has a text adventure game he got out for the CoCo Dragon and MC10 with the MCX adapter called Galaxy Trek Adventure Number 2, which apparently came from Hot Cocoa Magazine's September 1983 edition, programmed by Howard F. Beatty. I don't know. Anyway, Probably pretty familiar to anybody who's done text adventures. I would hazard a guess that it will seem like a familiar kind of program, a different adventure. It's always cool to have something new to play. So definitely appreciate Jim sharing that with us. Jim also has an announcement pointed to his blog. It says some examples of retro programming inspiration from out of the blue. It says he had some contact with some guys in Brazil running a modern variation of BASIC known as GL BASIC. And they were producing some pictures in the style of the semi-graphics modes for the CoCo. I think, so Jim took some inspiration from that. He's got a pretty long post about it and some tools I think he used for producing games and producing the graphics for some of his games or whatever. Looks like pretty good info. Definitely, if that sort of thing, if reading about how people are producing retro computing games is interesting to you, then you definitely should go and check it out on Jim's blog.
Jim's on a roll. Definitely amazing.
Yeah.
He's always got something going on.
He definitely is very prolific.
It's inspiring, that's cool to see.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Definitely an asset to our community, producing lots of games and such to play, not only for the CoCo, but also the MZ10. Very cool stuff. All right, moving on to another Jim who's got a couple of announcements. His first announcement was that Expander CoCo lives. Expander CoCo was the multi-pack replacement, or I guess that's the right thing to call it. Jim was showing this at CoCo Fest. I don't know if it was actually for sale. I think he just was demoing it. But he talks about it. He's working out the use of a single on the CoCo cartridge bus called Slen B, and how it's used, how it interacts with the Super IDE card. And he's been going back and forth some with Mark Marlette on the proper use of the Slen B. Of course, Mark Marlette was the designer on Super IDE, so the interaction there is natural. Anyway, has a little progress report there on Expander CoCo, so hopefully we'll see those rolling out before too long. A lot of people I know are looking for multi-pack interfaces. They definitely have enjoyed a rise in price on eBay over the past few years. Yeah,
they're getting pretty scarce on eBay. You don't see them very often.
Yep, I've got a few hanging around the house. Maybe I should break them out, turn them into a little cash. Might not be a bad idea.
Might be a little investment there for you.
Yeah, that's my retirement right there. All right. Well, Jim also moved on to have an announcement for a new product. He calls it CoCo Link 232. I think he has a similar product in the Commodore world with a similar name. Anyway, it's an RS-232 cartridge. It says it's 100% compatible with the Tandy RS-232 cartridge. Fits in a regular game cart shell. References some RS-232 mods from Sockmaster, and says he can go not only up to 57.6, but also 115.2 and even 234, so 230,400 bits per second. It's pretty damn fast. So he's got a pretty cool announcement there. I don't know if it's actually for sale or if he's just got the pictures announced or whatever. He says, let me know if there's any interest in the project. So if you're looking for an RS-232 pack for the CoCo, you definitely should reach out to Jim Brain and let him know that you're interested in the CoCo Link 232. You need a RS-232 pack there, Neil?
Always good to have one.
I'm a sucker for them. I've got a bunch of the Tandy ones, and I've got probably some of the other ones that are available, and we'll probably buy more if they show up.
Great form of communication on the CoCo, if you think about it.
Yeah, well, it certainly suits the era, and it's a simple protocol, and it's reliable and easy to program, and what else can you say? All right, moving on. Nick Marentis has once again given us another chapter of his Popstar Pilot blog. He's up to chapter 27 now. He's making good progress. I guess he's talking about the different kinds of joysticks that are out there in the world and what should be supported. I don't know. It kind of looks like he's getting close to the end on some of this. It says by the time he gets to the next chapter, he should have all 80 screens designed, and we'll be doing some play testing.
80 screens.
Yeah.
That's a big game.
Yeah, pretty cool stuff. So we've enjoyed keeping up with Nick's Popstar pilot, and certainly looking forward to a final release. Hopefully it's just around the corner. I know Neil is dying to do a review.
Oh, I am. I will be doing one for sure.
All right. Well, so the next item, it's not really a CoCo thing per se. It's from, let's see, the person is listed as Stuart C. Russell. I don't know Stuart. I'm not even sure how I came across this link, honestly, but he's got a blog entry called Building the Stick of Joy. And so basically he's built a custom joystick. And so that's a topic that's kind of near to my heart, and I know Neil as well. But the real thing is, so he's got arcade components in a box that he's made himself, apparently probably with a laser cutter. It's one of these that you see this commonly in sort of what you might call the maker community, where you get this construction method where you basically lay out a box, and instead of having flat walls, you end up having almost look like parapets on the top of a castle. And so you have all these little interlocking tabs that you put a box together with the interlocking tabs, and you can either glue them or screw them or whatever. But the tabs locking at the edges is what provides the rigidity for the box. He's got some construction details. I think he's actually building an Atari-style joystick. I think he claims that tracking down old Atari-style joysticks is expensive, although I'm not really sure that's true.
I think it would be more of trying to track down ones that work properly.
Maybe that's true. But anyway, so you can, if you sort of take his basic design, you can either build one. If you want to build it for the CoCo, you can either use the circuit diagram, the schematic that I posted previously for my Farfall style joystick, the one that Neil has used to build his own joystick. Or you could just build it Atari style and get one of those joypad adapters, as we say, Sega joypad adapters, but it'll also work with Atari style sticks, and plug it in there, and you could use that with your CoCo. Be cool stuff, huh? So you're going to run off and build one of these, Neil?
I have to say, it looks good. I like that design.
It does look pretty nice,
yeah.
Especially if you like that sort of, it's not quite steampunky, but makery looking, the interlocking tabs. All right, so pretty cool. All right, moving on, we've got a link to Jimmy Maher, M-A-H-E-R. I think it's Maher, Jimmy Maher. He's a fellow who, he calls himself the digital antiquarian. He's a computer historian, or the subtitle for his blog is A History of Computer Entertainment. He is author of the platform studies book on the Amiga, which is called The Future Was Here. Definitely a retro computing kind of guy. Has a lot of historical articles available. So his blog's pretty interesting. You may want to check it out in general. In particular, this title here is The Bruce Youth, which really doesn't make much sense until you read the the article. But basically, he's got a story of what happened to Infocom, which of course Infocom was the company that produced the game Zork and a number of others from back in the day that most of us who are into retro computing in some form will be familiar with. Infocom in the late 80s was acquired, I guess, by Activision, and then this story basically kind of implies that Activision sort of steered them into the ground. There's got a story there. The Bruce Youth there, I think, refers to some kind of employee revolt where they were sort of drawing an analogy between themselves and the Hitler Youth. So you can imagine what kind of employee morale there was at Infocom once it was part of Activision. Anyway, thought it was an interesting story. So if you have any interest in the history of Infocom and Activision, you may want to check it out. And if nothing else, check out the rest of Jimmy's blog. There's a lot of cool stuff there. So moving on to the next item. The next item is Steve Strobridge. In particular, he's got an announcement where he's doing a programming in basic series on his YouTube channel. And so he's gone through and is trying to walk through the books that came along with the CoCo to teach you how to program in BASIC. He's kind of going through chapter by chapter and relearning all that. And so I think he's up. Well, this was almost a month ago when I put this link in. He was up to like chapter 5. I think he may have progressed from there. Really, this link is more of a reminder to tell everybody that Steve's doing a lot of videos. Go check out his YouTube channel. Look at his stuff. He's put up all kinds of game videos. In fact, it seems like every time I turn around now, he's doing some sort of live stream or discussion, or that, he and Curtis have teamed up and are doing a lot of interviews. It's almost makes me tired to watch them and sort of puts us to shame because we should not doing a lot of interviews here. We need to do more. Hopefully we'll get some of that going this year. Anyway, hopefully Steve and Curtis won't interview all the good people before we get to them. And if they do, hopefully they won't make any of them mad at the community in the process, which I don't think they would do, but just in case. Anyway, so Steve's got a lot of a lot of videos out there on YouTube, including his Programming in Basic series. Definitely go check that out. He's got the link to his emails in the show notes, and then he's got links to his pages available there. Moving on, the next item is from L. Curtis Boyle, who's Steve's partner in crime on the YouTube channel these days. And so it's sort of an extended reference to Steve's YouTube channel. This is announcing that there's specifically a CoCo Fest wrap-up video that they've put together. Lots of footage from CoCo Fest, and kind of let you all know if you somehow missed CoCo Fest this year, this is an attempt to kind of let you know what you missed. We'll just say it that way. It's a pretty good video. I enjoyed it. Definitely should go check it out, whether you went to CoCo Fest or not.
Yeah, it's great to see the exposure this time. CoCo Fest needs good videos like that. People can see it. Yeah,
so for years we've had this thing going on. Every CoCo Fest is always some, the week before on the mailing list, there's always somebody said, "Oh, is there going to be live streaming? Not everybody can go," And it's like, well, there's always a little controversy. It's like, well, why don't you go? You should just come if you want to see it. There's always that contingent. And then there's, on the other hand, it's like, well, we'd like to put up some stuff, but a lot of times we don't get good networking signals down into the basement, or we don't have the techniques or the technical prowess to put the stuff up. So you're welcome to record stuff if you come, but the club's not going to do it, that sort of thing. So this time we had both Steve was available doing some recordings, and Tim Lindner was there doing some live streaming. So we had great coverage this year. And so hopefully that has appeased everyone. And I also want to applaud all of those guys. They managed to provide good coverage of the event, and they didn't get in the way. That was sort of a problem in the past when some people would try to do some streaming or do recordings of the event. A lot of times they sort of managed to insert themselves in a way that maybe made the event not quite as enjoyable. But Steve and Tim did a great job doing those recordings, and did so in a way that did not disrupt it for those of us who were there. So good job, guys. I really appreciate that.
Half the time I didn't even know they were recording. And when I watched some of these videos, I'm like, oh, wow, that camera was rolling.
How about that, huh? All right. Well, moving on, we've got a trio of announcements that come from Ed Snyder. Number one, so Ed Snyder, speaking of the RGB to VGA system, for a while, Ed's been producing these boards that were kind of like, I don't know if you call them daughter boards or motherboards or adapter boards or whatever. Basically, you had to buy Ed's board and then buy an FPGA board to kind of plug into it. So it's kind of a two-board sandwich. It was for taking the RGB signal from the CoCo 3 and connecting it to a VGA monitor. And it was basically, the same code from Louis Antoniosi, so it's been available for a while. But so Ed, he says in light of Cloud9's recent product release, that he's not going to produce these anymore. And so I'm not sure if that really needs to be, if he really needs to get out of the market, or if he's just got other things to do, or what. But anyway, sounds like they're not going to be available much longer. If you want one of those EDS boards, you can't get one of Mark's boards, whichever, you may want to move quickly on that one. Beyond that, there's the next item, also from Ed Snyder, that he's got a pre-production sample of the CoCo VGA project that he's showing pictures of. So we had a presentation from Brendan Donahue at the CoCo Fest about the CoCo VGA project, and this is a project that is for the CoCo 1 and 2, or maybe even for the Dragon. I think the board layout right now specifically for the American CoCo 2 motherboards, but basically allows you to pull the 6847 out of your CoCo, plug it into this board, plug the board back in where the 6847 went, and then have VGA output from your CoCo 2. Like I say, it's a nice thing to have. A pretty nice piece of kit, if you ask me.
I think the other cool thing with that is you can still keep the RF can inside the CoCo 2.
And that's true. You don't have to remove the RF can, so that's nicer. It's a nice alternative to, say, the ones where you'd remove the RF can to have the composite video out. So anyway, I think this is still a kind of a making progress but not quite there sort of announcement. So if you're interested in CoCo VGA, you may want to check out what Ed's doing. Check out the link in the show notes. Talk to Ed and/or Brendan and see what you can do to support the project.
It's really cool meeting Brendan. He's a nice guy.
He definitely seemed like a nice fellow. And like I said, he gave a very nice technical presentation, very intellectually satisfying. Cool stuff. Okay. And one more from Ed, an email to the list, CoCo 3 FPGA project analog boards. So we've mentioned the CoCo 3 FPGA project. That's an FPGA-based project to create essentially it's like an emulation of the CoCo 3, but done in sort of real hardware there on the FPGA board. But the FPGA boards are sort of generic development boards, and so they don't have regular CoCo connectors. You can't plug your normal CoCo joystick up to them or whatever. So these analog boards are designed to plug into the DE1 FPGA board, and then provide CoCo plugs for, I guess, for joysticks, and I'm not sure what else is on there. Let's see. Well, here's a pic. It looks like a couple of joystick ports. Maybe there's a couple of joystick ports. Oh, he's actually got a Wi-Fi module on there. And is that a serial port? Yeah, it looks like it. Anyway, it's a nice little board that plugs in the top of your DE1. And kind of finishes out. It still doesn't quite look like a CoCo per se, but it comes a little closer than just the DE1 board by itself. So if you are a CoCo 3 FPGA user, you definitely should check that out and consider if you can get one of these from Ed. I don't know if he's got any left at this point, but you may want to check that out. Moving on, so we've mentioned CMOC several times. It's a C, well, it's from Pierre Sarrazin. Pierre calls it a C-like language. There's some of the people using it insist that it basically is C. I think it probably depends on how much of a pedantic language lawyer you are on C as to whether it's C or C-like. But one way or another, it's a compiler that will take code that looks pretty much like C and produce machine language for the CoCo. Particularly in the extended color basic environment, but it sounds like he's also had some support for OS 9 in there, and even for the Vectrix, which is not a CoCo at all, but it does have the 6809 processor. Anyway, he's got a new release out, 0.1.25. Says it fixes an optimizer bug that affected ternary expressions, and those are the ones with a question mark in them. Then he says he's also published quote, high-res TXT, a library that provides a 51 by 24 black on green P-Mode 4 text screen. Anyway, if you are producing code, if you want to write in C or C-like code targeting your CoCo, this is the project for you right now, and so you probably want to go and check it out. All right. So moving on, the next item is from Jason Lee Steer. So Jason's been producing a lot of little hardware projects lately, and in fact, I know he's got a few more that I just haven't listed here, but this is going to be a placeholder for that as well. So you may want to check out Jason's other posts to the Color Computer Facebook group if you want to get a broader idea of what he's working on. But this one in particular was a design he's got laid out for a CoCo MIDI board. It sounds like he's producing a board for doing, MIDI. That's the music standard for driving synthesizers. And I think it says he's not using the Rutherford schematic, which I think is a historical one. I still have the impression that from a programming standpoint, his board should be compatible with the other MIDI boards in the CoCo community. He's got some pricing listed in the listing. I'm not sure if he's got these coming in or not. But anyway, if you're interested in doing MIDI on the CoCo and don't have a board, you may want to reach out to Jason and see how you can get one. You ever do MIDI, Neil?
No, but I've always wanted to get into it, and I'm actually, if he gets this together, I'm probably going to purchase one.
Oh, yeah.
I've been following this thread here for a little bit. Yeah, it looks good.
Cool. So the next item comes from Tony Capolini. It says, another set of newsletters from a long-lost CoCo user group, and in parentheses, the Penn Jersey Color Computer Club. So it sounds like he made a connection with somebody who was the son of someone who had been part of this user group, and got some newsletters available, and that he has scanned into PDFs, and I guess he's planning to upload them. He said he's contacted Guillaume Major. Is that colorcomputerarchive.com? Is that Guillaume?
I believe so.
Yeah, so it sounds like these might become available. Reading the old newsletters and stuff for the CoCo Color Computer or other retro computing groups from back in the day when they weren't retro computing, they were just computing clubs. Sometimes can be kind of fun. There'll be technical information, and sometimes there'll be references to group picnics or other stuff that's just kind of fun to kind of as period pieces to put you back in the day. If you're interested in that sort of thing, you may want to look for these Penn Jersey Color Computer Club newsletters. Very exciting. All right, so moving on. We have a email and a link from Tormod Volden. Tormod does a lot of work with the Nitrous 9 project, and so his title is OS9 Articles, Great Documentation. Says he found a nice collection of articles, quote unquote, hidden in the Nitrous 9 repository, including the OS9 user tutorial by Bob Montowski, OS9 boot process summary by Alan DeCock, a couple of stuff from other people there, including one from Boise Pete. So if you're interested in some in-depth discussion of OS9, kind of at a design level, you may want to go and check out this link that Tormod posted, and then we'll have the link in the show notes. Did you check any of that out, Neil?
I haven't yet, but I will.
Cool. Okay, so the next link comes to us from Chris Martin on the Facebook group. And so he started a thread there that picked up a huge number of comments. Maybe there's more than one link to it, because I know I've seen more than this. Anyway, this is the first one where he announced that he's using a CoCo to calculate the first 4,000 prime numbers. And so he goes through and he does some optimizations on that and runs them again and gets some help from other people and lets the machine run for a while. I know at some point he said he let it run for a while and then accidentally turned it off and had to start over again. And then he gets a lot of input from people helping him optimize his code and try different things or whatever. And it's really cool to read and see people express interest in this. And, I think it has a lot of applicability because it's sort of an abstract problem, calculating prime numbers or whatever. But it's just computing for fun, you know what I mean? And programming for fun and doing the optimizations to see how you make it run faster and that sort of thing. And it's just great to see all these people involved kind of in a community way. You get some big thinkers in there like James Jones and it's kind of cool to watch that play out. Anyway, if you're interested in that discussion, or if you have a need to find out what the 4,000th prime number is, maybe you can pick up the code and run it yourself, or if you have your own project, you might want to see about posting that, see if you can get the same kind of help out there. It's a cool thing. So definitely thank you, Chris, for posting that to the group and sharing that with us. So it's kind of cool. It's almost like a color computer version of Stone Soup.
Yeah, I enjoyed that post. That was great. You learn a lot from those kind.
Okay, so the next item comes from Mark McDougall. So Mark is again, somebody who's been around the community a long time, does a lot of cool projects. A lot of Mark's projects involve ports of games from other platforms, quite often done in such a way where he'll disassemble code and analyze how they really work and implement equivalent assembly code on the 6809 for the CoCo and that sort of thing. And he's the fellow who was he did Load Runner, and he is working on Night Lore, and his most recent project now is Space Invaders. And Space Invaders almost seems like a step down in some ways from some of those other projects. There's some interesting things, including rotating the screen and some interesting aspects of the hardware that have to be emulated that makes it a challenge. He's got in the link in the show notes. We'll take you to the mail that he sent to the list, which has a link out to his blog where he discusses some of these issues. It's a cool project, and definitely if you're interested in retro computer programming and that sort of thing, it's definitely worth a read. Cool stuff. Thanks, Mark. The next item also was sent to us, or sent to the community through Mark McDougall, but it's not his project. It's a project that's been getting a lot of attention in the retro computing world lately. The project is called Monster 6502 with the M, O, and S capitalized because Moss was the company that originally did the 6502, so it's sort of an homage to that. I think the people behind this project are the evil mad scientist people who have done some other projects. Anyway, I think that's who's doing it. One way or another, what they've done is they have taken the transistor level of design of the 6502, which was available through some earlier and dogged investigations of retro folks who actually did what's called decapping the 6502 chip. They actually basically used acid to dissolve the top of the package off so they could get a look at the actual silicon die under a microscope, so they could actually identify each transistor and see physically how they're all linked together. It's an amazing project. But anyway, taking the fruits of that work, somebody has now gone and produced a design for a printed circuit board that accommodates discrete electronic components, discrete transistors and such, to then build up a 6502 on a circuit board. This is a crazy project. It says total active transistors 4,237. Wow. It includes another 500 parts only on the Monster 6502, including 167 LEDs and their associated MOSFETs and capacitors and blah 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 whatever. So there's a total of 4,304 parts on this circuit board. It's funny because the way they've laid it out, it's got little pads on the side, which probably are analogous to the pads that you would have on an actual silicon die for mounting out to the pins in the ceramic package. So it almost looks like a giant version of a silicon die, except that once you populate it with transistors and stuff, it'll look a little bit different. But anyway, there's been talk of hooking one of these boards up in place of an actual 6502. I don't know if that's actually happened yet. I don't know. It could happen. Anyway, this is a crazy project. This is. I'm not sure there's any benefit to this in terms of like replacing a broken 6502 or so. No, you're not going to do that with this. But it's definitely an interesting exercise. an interesting proof that you can do it or proof that you understand the 6502. I would really enjoy it if somebody did this for the 6809. I don't expect to ever see it, but it'd be kind of cool. So if you're looking for a project and you want to do this for the 6809, fill me in. Let me know. I'll take pictures. I'll embargo the whole story until you're ready to release it. Whatever. Just let me in on it. It'd be fun.
I was thinking the same thing when I saw him post that. I'm like, that'd be really cool to see the 6809 in there.
So anyway, again, kind of a crazy project, but there you go. What are we all here for if it's not for some crazy projects?
That's right.
All right. So we're down close to the end of our news segment, but we've got 2 more items that are a little bit self-serving. But I think we're entitled to do that on our own podcast once in a while. So I'll go first. This is a reminder, and I sent an email to the list a couple of weeks ago. So if you're listening, you may have already seen it, but if you didn't already order, you still got a chance. So I do have at CoCo Fest, I had 3 cartridge games available: Farfall, Xmas Rush, and Follow CoCo. These are cartridge games, brand new. They're brand new games in brand new injection molded plastic cases with the circuit boards I designed, labels I designed, nice vinyl labels applied. They were packed into the die-cut cardboard boxes that came through Tim Lindner and shrink-wrapped and whatever. About as nice as you can get, and I'm sure John Strong would point out his were at least equally nice, if not nicer. But, beyond that, about as nice as you can get for a new CoCo game. And so I have them available: Farfall for $40, Xmas Rush for $30, Follow CoCo for $20. That, of course, would be $90 for the set. If you would like to have these games, they are still available for sale. Contact me through email or whatever, and I will estimate shipping for you and let you know. We can get you out some games. Be a very cool thing. Anyway, if you're interested, let me know. I'm not hard to find. Anyway, so there's my self-serving announcement, and so now Neil gets a self-serving announcement. He has his very nice-looking Sega Joypad adapters. I did do the circuit design, but he has built them up with the nice plastic boxes with the cutouts for the joystick connectors and the cables for the DIN connectors that go to the CoCo, including the one that goes to the serial port, which allows for control of the extra 2 buttons on the Sega Genesis Joypad. The serial connection is not necessary if you're using a Sega SMS Joypad or an Atari joystick, or not really necessary if you're using the Genesis Joypad, except you'll only get the use of the 2 buttons. But anyway, a very nice package there. Neil, you've got those available for $40, including your adapter and the manual. Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
Would you like to say anything else about them?
No, I think you covered it. That's good. and they are going to be in production for a while longer. I have about 3 left now, but I'm going to be, like I said, back to the soldering iron and getting some more made.
Cool. All right. Well, then that covers Neil's self-serving announcement. I see Jeremy Mikia, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Anyway, he had his fry with the money meme posted on the end of that. And I think he may have already gotten his adapter, if I'm not mistaken, and he seemed to enjoy that. So that's good. And with that, I think we have covered all of our news items. I'm going to need a little bit of break, and then we'll be back with a segment for feedback.
Now, if there is any dedicated group of old computer users, it is certainly the people who still love their CoCo, the Tandy Color computer.
All right, so the first feedback item I've got here comes from Aaron Wolf. Aaron Wolf is the person behind some of the later improvements to DriveWire that led to DriveWire 4, which is the Java-based server. DriveWire, of course, originally came from Boise Pete, but he had the servers were text mode applications and had basically just a file server functionality. Aaron came along and added some extra features like serial port emulation. And then I think that was DriveWire 3. And then later he did a server written in Java, and that grew out to be DriveWire 4. So anyway, so Aaron says, the podcast and your other projects are really great. I don't care what people say. You're all right. Aaron, of course, is having a little fun with me and Neil. He has a pretty dry sense of humor. But anyway, he went on to suggest that I should post something about the podcast to the TRS-80 Color Computer subreddit, and so I did. So if you use Reddit, that's Reddit, you may be interested in looking at the TRS-80 subreddit. There's a link to that in the show notes. And I did post something about the CoCo Crew podcast there. Anyway, good to hear from you, Aaron, and thanks for the feedback. The next item is from a fellow named Ron Klein. So Ron has been communicating with me for a little while, and this isn't strictly about the podcast. I guess it's really more about me, but I'm going to include it here anyway because I'm pretty excited about it. But so Ron took an interest in my CoCo 3 video player. I had made the sources available for that some time ago out in public, and unfortunately, no one had really taken much interest in the project. And I admittedly is not very well polished for someone else to take up the reins, but I thought there was enough there that somebody who was interested could get the project working and do some video conversions on their own and figure things out. And then, I'd be happy to help them along. But I hadn't heard of anyone doing that in how long has it been? 5 years? Something that's been out there. Until I had Ron. And so Ron comes along and says, hey, I'm interested in this project. I'd like to make it work. Can you help me? So I pointed him at the source code and gave him a few pointers, and he asked some questions, and I answered those and pointed him in, here and there, and had to go back and forth 2 or 3 times. But so now I get this email from Ron, says, I finally had some time to start working with your video player again, and all caps, got it working. And so Ron goes on to tell me he's been able to convert some Stevie Strobridge CoCo review videos and has them running on the MES CoCo 3, emulated CoCo 3 using the VHD virtual hard drive support that's available in the emulators. And I have a version of my video player that'll read off of a VHD. Ron doesn't have, or at least at the time of this recording, does not have a Super IDE card, which is the actual hardware option for the video player. But I think he's out there trying to acquire an IDE card as we speak. So hopefully there'll be somebody other than me who can produce CoCo 3 digital videos soon. Ron actually said he was going to try to improve the documentation and update some things that have changed over the past few years, so that to smooth things along if anybody else wants to try to produce some video conversions for the CoCo 3. So I think that's pretty exciting. So thanks, Ron. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for the it's feedback for me. And I'm going to take it as feedback for the podcast because I'm going to just guess that you're a listener. What do you think, Neil?
Oh, that's great to see. I've always been a big fan of that video player. That was my first CoCo Fest, 2010.
Yeah. How about that?
Remember you had that demoing there.
Yeah. Pretty exciting stuff. All right. Anyway, so we got one more. This is from guess he's a Brazilian fellow. I don't know. It's a new person to me, Leonardo Suarez. He suggests in the title of the episodes, don't just use episode in, but rather a title that describes 1 or 2 of the topics in it. So I think he's talking about in the actual RSS feed for the CoCo Crew. I tend to just list them as episode 1, episode 2, episode 12, whatever. I think what he wants is And, in this case, it'd be like episode 12, CoCo Fest recap and roundtable discussion or something like that. I think it's a good suggestion. I think it's not always been easy to think of good titles like that, but I'll take it under advisement, and maybe we'll start doing that possibly with this episode, or we'll see. What do you think, Neil? Do you think that's a good suggestion?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, everything helps, right?
That's right. So I don't know. No promises. We'll see. But I think it makes a certain amount of sense. Anyway, well, those 3 items, that's all the feedback we've got for this segment. So, again, we'd like to hear your feedback. The reason we do this podcast is to build a community and keep the community strong. We'd like to know there's people out there listening. If there's no one out there listening, there'd be no point in doing this. Thankfully, we do have some good statistics on downloads, at least. So we know there are people at least downloading the podcast, but it's always good to get some confirmation that people are listening to the podcast and thinking about things and have ideas for improvements. So it's great to hear from everyone. And if you want to send us some feedback, please do so. Again, that's just the easiest way would be feedback@cococrew.org, and go from there.
Even if it's not feedback, if you want to, send us a segment or whatever you want played, we'll try to get it on the air for you.
That's right. Just like in this episode coming up, we have a tech segment that's from a guest presenter. If you've got something you'd like to present, we are not above playing it out, especially when it saves us from having to do a segment. Well, that's our feedback segment for this month.
You are listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast with Neil Blanchard and John Linville. Like how I switched those names around? I'm the original gamer Stevie Stroh, and I'm a Coco Nut. And if you're a Coco Nut too, then visit I'mACoconut.com for all kinds of cool Coco links, including my YouTube gaming videos. So visit I'mACoconut.com, and long live the Coco. Back to you, Neil and John.
All right, and now we'd like to present the CoCo Fest Roundtable. We apologize if the audio doesn't sound the greatest, as this was recorded live at CoCo Fest 2016. Please enjoy.
I'll just tell you about the CoCo Crew. I think it was last CoCo Fest, I kind of started proposing the idea to Neil and some others that maybe we could have a podcast. Boise was excited and kind of helped us with some artwork and some encouragement. And Neil had, for a while, had sort of been constantly chatting me and poking me and saying, hey, I'd like to do some more stuff in the community, but not from a real technical coding kind of perspective, but from a contribute to the community perspective. And so I kind of had him in mind, in the back of my mind, for those kind of opportunities. And I've been listening to podcasts from a variety of retro computing communities that are out there, and some better, some worse. But Randy Kindig has been part of our community off and on a bit. I listened to some of his stuff, and kind of got to the point of, well, why don't we have a podcast? And then eventually it came to, well, because none of us have made it, right? And so at some point it kind of clicked, and I knew Neil had done some DJ work, and so had some amount of audio editing skills or whatever. And I figured I could talk about stuff, so we could get together, and I could do maybe a little more in depth on the technical. I know Neil's a bit more of a gamer than I am, so I thought it was maybe a good team, And so that's where it went from there. About a month after last CoCo Fest, we produced an episode 0. Which was sort of an in vogue thing to do for new podcasts a year ago, and that doesn't seem to be anymore. So I guess everybody who was a C programmer that wanted to do a podcast has already done one. Anyway, we did an episode 0. We kind of didn't have a huge agenda at that point. We're just kind of trying it out, see if the chemistry was okay, kind of get a feel for it. Get a chance to do the editing, see how that comes out. And just in releasing that, you had to set up a certain amount of infrastructure. At that point, we were using Libsyn, which is a pretty canned infrastructure provider for podcasts. But still, you had to get a little bit together. We had to get To get on iTunes, you had to have the icon the right size and shape for your podcast and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. But so anyway, we did it and seemed to be successful, and we've kind of gone on from there. So I'm going to pause as an introduction. I'll let the other guys speak here.
I think Curtis should come up here too, because Curtis is my partner in crime as well. So
There's not going to be trivia, is there?
No trivia.
You already
Only
won
Canadian
that.
trivia.
You want to go next?
How much maple syrup does it take to power a cocoa?
Depends on the pancakes.
Yeah, right.
Well, I just want to say I'm really happy to be here. This is my first, as my wife calls it, nerd convention I've ever been to. So,
Congratulations.
And I feel like hopefully I fit in and hopefully accepted. So, and you guys are the first podcast I've ever listened to. I've never heard a podcast before. So basically what I did was about a year ago, I started a YouTube channel with my kids because we all played this game called Minecraft. In order to learn how to play, we started watching people play on Minecraft to learn, and then we discovered that there are people who are called YouTubers, and what they do is they just put up videos all the time. And there are some YouTubers who are actually quite well known and are actually earning their living off of YouTube. Some of them are multi-millionaires off of playing games on YouTube. So, and to do that, it's a numbers game. You got to have a lot of subscribers, a lot of viewers, and you get micro pennies per view off of the revenue sharing. So, a year into this, I haven't made $100 yet. I'm not in it for the money. So, but
Tens of 20s of dollars.
Tens of 20s of dollars, yes. So we started. So then my kids were like, "Well, let's do Minecraft videos, and let's do this, and let's do that." So my first YouTube video was a video because I also do technical training, so I'm used to like teaching people how to do things. I had to learn to install mods to Minecraft because the kids were like, "I want to run this mod. I want to do this. I want to do that." So I had to figure out how to do it. Since I had to figure that out, I'm like, well, let me make a how-to video because I'm sure I'm not the only idiot who had to go through this process. So let me help out the next idiot. And I made a video on how to modify Minecraft, and then just kind of evolved from there. We spent about a few months doing lots of Minecraft videos. In the back of my mind, I knew I wanted to do retro stuff because I've been playing games since the late 70s. And so I'm like, well, I'll do the stuff for the kids, but Daddy's going to want to do something at some point too. And I always knew from day one I wanted to do CoCo videos because that was my thing. My childhood was, and when I say childhood, I was about 14, but my youth was wrapped around my color computer. I lived inside that thing. And so I figured one of these days I'm going to start making CoCo videos. And in order to do this, I figured nobody's going to know what the hell I'm talking about. So I started off by making a video, which was my version of Boise's book that I didn't know existed. I put together my own little PowerPoint on here's what the color computer was. It was this computer. Here's a couple of pictures. Here's some snapshots I found on Google. And let me explain to somebody what the hell I'm talking about because nobody's going to know. And so I made like a 25-minute video on the introduction to what the color computer is. I did that, and then I started making games. That led to finding out I wasn't the only person in the world who knew what a color computer was. And so I started getting comments on the video. I started reaching out, looking for people too on Google+. I found out about the Google+ group, which introduced me to the Facebook group. I started getting comments on my videos from people like Curtis and Alan Huffman and a few other people. The thing that blew my mind, too, was I had made a video of Doubleback. Somebody shared it to Dale Lair, said, hey, Dale, you should take a look at this. And then I saw Dale Lair put a comment on my video, and I was like, oh, my God, my mind is just blown like a childhood hero. I said 2 words about something I did. I was blown away. So that was kind of cool how it all became connected. And I started to learn about the community.
I'll just, if I can pause you,
yeah.
It's probably good that he met Dale Lear before he met Steve Bjork.
So I've been doing the videos for about 6 months. I've known about this community for about 6 months. I owned a CoCo when CoCos were new. I didn't do too much with the CoCo 3 because I kind of moved to the Tandy 1000 at that point. But I think like everybody else, I had one. It was a part of my life. I didn't then, and I don't now do anything serious with it. I play games, and I'm a guy who plays games. It's what I do. So I know it can do other things, and my computer at home can do other things, but I don't do those things either. That's just what I choose to do, and I think the cool thing about a platform is that if it can appeal to everybody. It can appeal to people who want to run OS9, who want to write utilities and tools, and who also want to play games. That's a great platform, and this 35-year-old platform still does that. So because of YouTube, is why I'm here. And so it's been very cool. I did put together a video that just kind of shows how I make the videos, because I've been asked that question. So I don't know, do I have to do anything, Tim, to play that?
Yeah,
so it's about
you have to find it in your channel.
Oh, okay. It's about a 5-minute thing, and it's just a little thing I recorded showing my software that I used to record with.
Yeah.
Hey, what is going on, CoCo Fest? This is Original Gamer Stevie Stroh, and what you're looking at here is what my PC recording system setup looks like. Now, hopefully by now you've seen one of my videos, either on YouTube, on Facebook, or at the table. And I wanted to show you real quick what the actual setup looks like. What's the software I use to do all of this? So right now I'm doing one in an emulator, but I couldn't do this as easily with a real color computer now because I've got a variety of different capture devices that would allow me to capture a real CoCo. So on the left-hand screen here, I have X-Roar running, which is a Dragon CoCo emulator, and I'm playing Nick Marentes' Donut Dilemma. On the right screen here, which is where I do all of my recording and broadcasting, this is where the magic happens. This software is called XSplit. I'm trying to see if I can see it on the screen here. It's kind of hard to see. If I move it down just a little bit, you can see the name of the software here. If you look at this here, it says XSplit Broadcaster. This is where all the magic happens. This software is kind of like a Photoshop where I can arrange everything on the screen and create my scene, and then everything I see on the screen I can record, and I can also broadcast live with this as well. And so it's all broken up into different elements, and I've been very lucky that I've been able to find elements online. I just do Google searches and I look for things, and I find things that are what are called PNG files, so they have a clear background. So for example here, the fact that I'm inside this television, well, this television is just a clear file, and that's my webcam. My webcam is an element. This television is an element. This picture of the CoCo is an element. You can see I can move this stuff around. The little Tandy badge here is an element. Now, some of these things here I created myself in Photoshop. I found a font that's called Color Basic, and it's the old school uppercase font. So I've done some of my own artwork in Photoshop that I have as elements as well. And basically I can put everything here on the screen, and then I can just record it. I can talk, so I have a microphone right here. So this microphone captures my big fat mouth. This is my webcam right here. This webcam is what captures my big fat head. And then I show up on this TV screen. Now right now in the TV screen behind me, you see the rest of my office. But what I also have here is I have a green screen, and it's literally just a curtain, but it's a certain color. I forgot what they call this color. We'll call it green. And, we'll pull this curtain back, and now when I come back over here, and I look at myself on the TV, now I am basically clear, transparent against the background because of the green screen behind me. I've got these giant frickin' stadium lights here. These things here are like photographer lights. And you can see here I've got the green screen behind me. I've just got this ghetto fabulous kind of rod hanging across my ceiling. It's using just kind of a tension mount. It's forced in there. It happens to be exactly 10 feet wide, so kind of the pressure keeps it up there. And then, I can do all kinds of crazy stuff. I can resize things. I can move things around. And then I can just start recording. And then when I'm done recording, I just upload that to YouTube as a single file. So hopefully this little peek here is, a little bit informational, maybe a little bit educational, who the heck knows of what it looks like. So just real quick too, here's my current setup. This is what I call configuration 3.0. I've kind of go back and forth between using shelves. I'm back to shelves because I got so much crap here. On the left-hand side, I've got my Sega Saturn. I do a lot of live recordings off of that. It's not emulated, it's the real thing. My Xbox One. This is my soundboard. I use this soundboard to play live samples whenever I'm doing a live broadcast. Here's my CoCo 3, as obtained by Neil Blanchard of the CoCo Crew Podcast. This is my primary capture device. This is called a Hodgepodge. This is a high-definition, what's called a PVR, personal video recorder. This will record over HDMI, and it records 1080p high definition at 60 frames per second, so I can capture pretty much anything. I can capture a modern game console. I can capture another computer. I can capture just about anything. Right here, I've got a little device that is called Pardon the noise. So this is one of my live capture devices. This one here is called a USB Live, also made by Hodgepodge. This is an analog capture. This will capture your traditional composite and S video. The challenge I've been having is that the CoCo doesn't output composite in a way that shows up on modern technology. And so my workaround was this little guy here. This is a completely generic one. This is called a USB analog TV stick. But what this guy had was a normal coaxial input, which I've converted to use the RF thing here. So I basically can take a CoCo, any CoCo, 1, 2, or 3, plug it in here via RF, and then this guy here actually will capture the thing live, and it'll show up on my screen here using the same software. So instead of piping in an emulator here for the picture, I could actually pipe in a live CoCo and still record it or broadcast it. So I've got a couple of different doohickeys that I can record live with. This is an HDMI switcher which feeds into my capture device. My capture device passes through to this monitor here, so I can switch sources here and be able to watch it on this screen. I got a little USB hub here to plug all my crap into. Here's my CoCo 3. Again, there's the microphone, headphones over there. That's kind of it. So I think I've talked long enough. This is a little looky look at what my stuffy stuff looks like, what the software is like, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed watching some of those videos that you saw at the fest, and hopefully you enjoy them on YouTube as well.
All right, sweet. So clearly Steve has found an expensive hobby to go with his expensive hobby. Well, that's cool. Clearly Steve has a pretty, I wouldn't say complex, maybe advanced setup that enables him to do some cool stuff with some production things. Anybody, have you ever posted a YouTube video? Any of you? A couple of people. So I post a few. I'm nowhere near that level of production quality. I take them on the cell phone, sometimes with myself, or sometimes like this, whatever. It's easy. It is easy as hell to post a video to YouTube. So if you're doing something, do a project, whatever, zap it, set it up. It's kind of cool, right? You can post it, if you have, you have Facebook or Google Plus. Really easy to post those links out and share them with people. And sharing is what makes a community, right?
Social media is how I met everybody, so it works.
And so you don't need Steve's level of production to have something worth sharing.
My favorite videos are, what's his name now? The guy in Canada who records it all. There's a lot of them in Canada, but not Tardy, but the other guy, Marlon Lee. Marlon Lee does everything old school, and he records off the real hardware, and I love his videos.
He's the one that's always today.
We've got Marlon Lee. Some of my favorite videos are from Marlon Lee, and
And I hope you've enjoyed this walkthrough.
Yeah, and so the top 3 compliments that I like hearing are, number 1, I enjoyed that. Number 2, this brings back memories, because that's what I'm doing. I'm reliving memories. And then the other compliment is, like what Neil said, I like your production value. And for me, that whole concept of production value is something I learned by owning a CoCo, because I knew it was an inexpensive machine, and I saw what people were doing with it, and I was like, there are people who take this seriously. There's people who are proud of what they're doing then as they are now. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of like a work ethic, value, character trait that you either have or you don't. And I learned that by looking at the amazing games on the color computer, how much detail and thought and how much creativity went into making those things. So that's a trait I picked up and I've tried to carry forward. So because I don't necessarily have any talent, I can masquerade that with technology. But yeah, that's the highest compliment I could hear is that, I enjoy, this brought back memories. And then if you like the production value, that's a bonus as well. And then, so the other cool thing that's happened, again, not knowing it, the other thing that we've done recently is I can also pipe in a live feed from Skype. So if we're on a Skype call, I can pipe in the video, and I can also pipe in the chat. So when we're doing a live stream and people are chatting, I can have the chat up on the screen. There's so many things I can pull together in the software. It's amazing. So we've done these things that all kind of happen unplanned, all kind of happened organically, but one day I just said, hey, let's play some games. So I'll just do some games on demand and just type in the chat what you want to play. And that was a couple hours of these marathons. That turned into, I remember one time Nick Marentes was typing in the chat telling me how to play Donut Dilemma because I couldn't figure out how to pick up the dough or throw the dough. Again, my mind was blown. I'm like, the dude who made the game's telling me how to play the game. It's like, pinch me, you know? So that was awesome. So and then we started getting people calling in on Skype, and we're having them on video, and we're getting to listen to them, all unplanned. All of this kind of organically happened, and that went to, well, let's plan this next time. You know, and Curtis has been very helpful in that, and so Curtis has been making all these arrangements and emailing, and Curtis and I right now, we've got spreadsheets and lists and calendars and schedules, and we got plans.
We can follow them.
Yeah, so we actually are now planning things far in advance. We're hoping to be booked through May and beyond, and we've got some really cool projects down the road that partially because of also Curtis's website, which has been a great resource. I used to just talk out of my ass, basically, because I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. Okay, this is what I think they meant or tried to do. And then Curtis would put some comments saying, well, you know, here's some actual facts. And then I started actually using his website as a resource in advance, and I actually tried to speak a little bit intelligently about, okay, well, this game was developed by so-and-so, and it requires 4K of memory, and now let's take a look. So I sounded less like an idiot after I started using his. So I went from using his website to actually using him. So now he's like my partner in crime. And so Curtis and I have been working on a lot of projects, and these ideas just come to us, and so I'm having more fun doing these projects than just playing the game. So like we're doing showcases. We did a showcase where we showed off all the semi-graphics games and just talked about them. We did a showcase on the speech sound pack, ironically, right around the same time you guys did yours. So so those kind of projects and the interviews, like having Rick Adams and then having Dale Lear that was scheduled and planned, and to be able to communicate it in advance to get people to possibly join it too was kind of cool. So we got more of that on the horizon, so who knows where it's going to go, but it's all these relationships that we're making that's allowing us to do these cool things.
Now, when you actually go to do a show, do you have a script? Do you have an outline? Do you have any of that kind of preparation, or do you just sort of bounce it back and forth a little bit and go?
It's kind of all the above. Yeah, we do.
At the beginning, it was all the bounce back and forth.
At the beginning, it was all unplanned, random. Rick Adams was the first one we kind of had a plan for, and basically Curtis came up with a whole bunch of questions because of his knowledge as well. So Curtis had a bunch of questions to ask in advance, and what we're trying to let everybody know too is that if you're kind enough to do an interview, we're not going to ambush you. We're not going to do anything to embarrass you or anything like that because we appreciate the fact you're even talking to us. So we actually gave them a list of questions in advance. And if there's anything you would prefer us not to talk about, we won't talk about it. Or whatever, you know. So we kind of try to give them all these questions in advance to give them the benefit of the doubt to say, I would rather not talk about that. And so we've done that on the last two.
And they'd have to look it up themselves.
Yeah, that's happened too, where they triggered a memory technique. And one thing we've started experimenting on the Dale Lear interview is having a co-interviewer.
Yeah.
Or multiple guests. Like Dale Lear and Rick Adams both worked together at the same company for years. And they traded shared code and stuff like that. So we asked Rick, would he be a guest host with Dale? And because he knows Dale personally and knew him back in the time, he knew to ask questions we wouldn't have known to ask in a million years. And we had a whole bunch of things that came up, and Dale would suddenly remember something that Rick had prodded him about, and vice versa. So they both were triggering each other to remember stuff that they wouldn't have remembered if we were just interviewing them on our own. And we want to try to get more of that. In fact, one of them was we're planning coming up here. A bit of a spoiler. And some of you might have met him yesterday because he came back. One of the guys came here last night was Glenn Soggy, who was one of the programmers at the Image Producers, who did the original first run of CoCo cartridges in 1980. They actually were working on breadboard prototypes from Tandy for the CoCo before it was released. And we're getting him, we're getting Bill Moles, who was the president of the Image Producers, and then his boss, Al Baker, who's the charge of programming there. And we're going to get a podcast with all three of them on at the same time, talking about early development, how do they got relationships with Tandy, etc.
I just want to make a note about Dale and Rick, two of the nicest guys you could ever talk to.
Oh, yeah.
I interviewed them both for the book. They were just stellar.
Yeah, I didn't know about your book when I got into this, and it's been between your book and their podcast, there's so much information, and the list, obviously, and everything else. There's so much information out there. I'm blown away that more things are happening now than happened in the 80s.
Well,
or even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So if I could diverge a little bit, just talk about our preparation. So
Yeah.
we started out, after the first episode. I think even the first episode I had a little bit of an outline. It was maybe just a text file. Tried using Markdown. Anybody familiar with Markdown? Yeah, it's kind of a simplified version of web HTML or whatever. We tried using that, but it's kind couldn't find anything that could process it into show notes that you could actually publish. And I think Neil had problems viewing some of it anyway. So at this point, they actually edit the show notes in an HTML page, but so they can be published. But anyway, I try to put together an outline of the basic show. It's kind of formulaic at this point, with the intro and the news and that kind of stuff. And the news items. It's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
we have 30 news items in some shows or whatever, and I try to cut them out. I feel kind of brutal sometimes. It's like,
it's like an audible version of the CoCo.
But it's like sometimes, well, look, this thing. Well, so he posted a picture, but did he really mean to announce something, or there's not enough information there to really go forward, or? Well, he's having fun, that's cool, but is that really news that somebody's having fun with their CoCo? So I cut a bunch of stuff out, and still we end up with these really long things. It's just amazing how much stuff is going on in a month's time, or the past 2 episodes have been 3 weeks apart.
Wow.
And they're some of our longest episodes because of the news segments, right? But
we try to aim for around an hour, but
yeah, we started an hour and figure we'll hit an hour and a half, and instead we hit 2.5, or. But yeah, so there's that. We usually go back and forth there and debate about it. But we've been trying in the past 6 months or so. We've been trying to have these host topics, and a lot of times those are made up like right before we record them. What do you want to talk about?
Just for the moment. Yeah.
Sometimes they're influenced directly by I picked up some actually non-CoCo retro stuff from someone recently that was a big enough thing I had to get some off-site storage. And so that was what do you do with your CoCo stuff? Where do you put it? So we get some topics like that. Once in a while it'll be something, a couple of people get in a fight over something, so we'll talk about whatever the issue was for the fight. Anyway. And then, of course, I've been trying. I was doing the technical segments, and I was trying to walk through the basic architecture of the CoCo. We've kind of gotten through all that, including the CoCo 3 at this point. So I'm starting to have to get creative for technical topics. So anybody wants to suggest them, please feel free to send me email or whatever.
Third-party hardware.
That's
keep you busy for years.
There's definitely items there, but. So, Neil, how do you come up with your game topics?
I usually go with ones that interest me. I'm starting with the ones that were my favorites, but or if sometimes I think of something or.
Yeah. So I'd say the only problem with Neil's game topics is they're too short.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So we should have some longer segments from Neil, don't you think?
And they should have some video too.
Video too.
One of the examples that I liked was hearing stories unfold through the different episodes. And the one example that always comes to mind is the fact that VCC was going to become open source and become a 2.0.
Right.
And then they're talking about doing it. Are they going to be able to do it? Now it's done, and you can kind of hear the story unfold through the episodes. That was kind of cool. To be a fly on the wall as that was happening. I liked the roundtable thing you guys had right around Christmas time. That was pretty cool.
We should have another one for some
More
events.
people on there.
Maybe we should have a CoCo Fest roundtable, huh?
Yeah, kind of are right now.
Well, yeah.
It's been an eye-opener for me hearing all this stuff, and I'm a junkie for that. I could never get tired of listening to somebody talk about something that's interesting. And if it happens to be geeky, technical stuff, for me, it's not. There's never enough, And so what I try to do on the interviews, though, is we try to think of the audience's attention span. So we try to have a 2-hour cap in mind when we do these live interview things, just because they could go on forever.
Yeah.
And to me, it's all interesting, but maybe not necessarily to everybody else.
Yeah, we get both ends. We get people complain about the pet going too long. Mm-hmm. We get some people say, "Oh, that just feels like it's sit down and then it's over." And so you get some people who want more.
Yeah. The way I listen to the podcast is I listen to it in increments, so I'll stop and do something. So it doesn't really matter to me how long it is,
right?
Because I just eat it up in chunks.
Well, there's a podcast that's notorious for 6-hour episodes called The Intellivisionaries, and that was the feedback they'd get month after month, and they started to get a little cross with it at some point. But that became their saying is, well, I encourage you to use this feature of most podcast players where you have this this double line that you can pause the episode. So, if it's too long, you can hit pause and you can fast forward and that sort of thing. We did put, that was originally just out of an annoyance, or didn't put in any time references for when the segments were. And people, asked for that or whatever, so we eventually acquiesced and start putting in the references if you want to.
If somebody wanted to jump forward to a particular segment.
Yeah, some people wanted the tech segments, some people hate the tech segments, or some people want to skip one thing and go to the next, or whatever,
And it's real nice to also, if you look at, go through it once, listen to it. Oh, there's more. I want more details.
Yeah, that's true.
Go back and find us to it again.
Yeah. I started doing that recently. I went back to episode 0, like the day I was getting ready to fly out. Hearing the 6809 discussion again, it made more sense with 6 months' time to absorb everything. The first time you hear it, it's like it's the Teflon, but over time it starts to sink in,
And it made it really easy for me to go back. My wife wouldn't be interested in all the CoCo stuff, but she does listen to my part of the podcast, which is an interview, and she enjoyed that. But she wouldn't want to listen to the rest of it, so I can forward that point.
Yeah. Your interview was great too. I enjoyed your interview both with the podcast and with us, and thank you for doing that, John. Strong. But so, what does it take to be a podcaster? Are there any rules or regulations or governance for this? Or
well,
you have to like talking.
There's certainly. I mean, you have to register with the government and pay a tax. It's not that difficult. Like I say, you have to produce an MP3 player and or an MP3 file, which is a little bit of a philosophical issue for me due to some patent stuff. But get beyond that. You have to be able to produce MP3 files. If you want to be listed on iTunes, which you probably do, they have some they have a requirement for your video or your
cover art.
Yeah, your cover art. You need to declare your content style or whatever. Like if you're an adult themed podcast or versus a family friendly whatever. So there's some stuff. Apple has a bunch of custom tags to put in your RSS feed that are, I don't know even where they're defined, but if you use a service like Libsyn, they'll generate the feed information for you, so you don't have to worry about it. But if you want to control your own feed, you have to be aware of those tags and put them in and update them. It's a technical issue, But
now, is that for searching in iTunes? If you search CoCo or something?
Well, just to even get through their listing or whatever, that's like just because you have an RSS feed that's valid doesn't mean that iTunes will process it in a valid way. So you have to they have like RSS Plus or whatever for Apple. But that's the thing. You need an RSS feed. Is fundamentally what you need. That's what the podcatchers use, whether it's iTunes or something else. If you want people to listen, you have to be available through the services that people want to use. So that's iTunes. There's this Google Play Music that has just finally come out and
it's working now.
Has podcasts now.
Stitcher.
There is Stitcher. Who uses Stitcher? Anybody use Stitcher? Yeah, exactly.
I'm using it just because.
Because you're one of those. So if you've gone back and made all of your old episodes available on Google Play.
They're all available. It just picks up the RSS feed.
Once
so
Google knows about the RSS feed,
yeah, you don't really do an individual feed per episode. You just have one feed that you add each episode to as you go along. So anything that picks up the feed will have all the episodes, basically.
Is that including the show notes as well?
Well, so that's the thing. That's part of the RSS stuff. You can embed show notes in the feed, but you only get so much space, and then some software actually chokes if the overall feed gets too big. So we used to try to put some of the show notes when they were smaller. We'd try to embed the show notes in there. That never worked very well anyway because trying to put HTML tags inside of HTML, got to be properly escaped and all that sort of stuff. So now all we do is put a URL in that points to where the actual notes are. And so if you look in the associated links or whatever with in the feeds, you'll just see a URL that points out to cococrew.org, so you can just get the notes that way. And like I said, they're all maintained as HTML. Even when we pass it back and forth, it's all HTML. But yeah, I mean, there is a little bit of a technical thing, but if you wanted to start your own podcast, I would advise you go to Libsyn or a similar service, get their minimum subscription. One of the reasons why we moved away from Libsyn is that we had a $5 a month subscription. You can pay more for a little bit better service, but for $5 a month, you can upload 50 meg a month. And it resets every month, so you can do the 50 meg next month, and 50 meg the next month, and forever. But any given month you can only do 50 meg, and you can't skip a month and do 200 meg, or do 100 meg either. And so 50 meg is enough for an hour episode, maybe. Right?
It kept us too short.
It kept us a little short. Maybe that's not so bad for discipline-wise, especially if you haven't developed what you're going to talk about. Some people get on and just talk too much or whatever, so maybe that's not so bad. But like I said, there are services that are out there where you just basically upload your MP3 file, and then that's it. They'll even do the feed stuff. There are even services, I don't know if Libsyn's one of them, maybe it is. There are services that basically will take care of talking to Apple for iTunes or whatever, so you don't really have to do anything except upload your MP3 file, and that's it, you're a podcaster. So that's not too bad. So what about YouTube? Other than YouTube itself, are there any listing services or anything like that you need to deal with?
I don't have to do the good thing about YouTube is anybody can upload anything they want.
Yeah.
But it can also be the bad thing about YouTube as well.
Right.
And it automatically gets linked through Google Plus too, because YouTube's owned by Google. So.
Yeah. If you're interested in doing YouTube, it would make sense to have a Google Plus account. YouTube will automatically post to Google Plus and Twitter. So anytime I upload a video, I've got it set to automatically create a social media post for both of those. They won't talk to Facebook, probably because Google Plus and Facebook are competing with one another. And some things will only talk to Facebook on a personal account where I'm trying to do things through a page instead of through my personal Facebook. But there is no requirements. Probably a similar thing, you have to list what your channel content is and for what age group. My stuff is all, all ages. That was kind of a conscious intent, is I wanted everything to be family friendly. Because the ones my kids were watching, once I knew who these people were, I didn't have to worry about what they were watching. There's a lot of crap on the internet, if you haven't noticed that or not. And there's a lot of crap on YouTube. So there's things on there that I just would prefer my kids not hear or see. Yeah. And so I wanted to make sure that anything that I put up there would be at PG at worst. Like I'll say crap. And that actually taught me to learn to have a filter, because I've never had a filter. I speak extremely freely all the time. Not everybody's used to that, but I learned that concept of a filter, which was probably a good thing in many cases. So
also gives you a brand too, right?
Yeah. So that was a conscious decision on my part, and other than that, you rate the category. You could be a blogger, or I actually have a gaming category, so mine's listed as gaming. There are some pretty cool things built into YouTube, and the cool thing is because YouTube's owned by Google, it helps you be found in Google searches as well. So now when I'm trying to find a piece of cover art to make a thumbnail for a video, and I start Googling CoCo or Tandy Color Computer, I see a lot of my videos come up almost on the first page. And so all this crap I'm throwing out there now is being pushed to the top of searches because it's the Google machine is getting oiled by feeding it, So if you're interested in trying to, be found and build something, using YouTube and Google Plus is an organic way to get your search engine optimizations boosted.
Now, so some of the stuff you do is live. Mm-hmm. Some of it, I assume, is pre-recorded.
Pre-recorded and just uploaded.
So when you do that, how much is recording and how much is editing?
When it's live, I don't edit. And that's the good news and the bad news, right? So the good news is number one, it's immediate for the people who are watching it, and then when it's done, it's a video that lives on forever. Mm-hmm. So when I don't have time to edit, I will do live. It allows me to be both lazy and get content up there as quickly as possible. And then when I do have time, I prefer to record and edit and have some creative control. The nice thing about the live, but anything I do live that's there, I can still download again. I can download it as an MP4 file, then I could re-edit it and and load it back up. And that's one of the things we're letting these authors know too, that you know, I can't control live, but let's say you say something and you realize maybe I shouldn't have said that or whatever. I can then take down the video. I can edit that out and put it back up. So it would only be heard briefly. It wouldn't live on forever.
Right,
so we're
right.
giving them that safety net as well. But lately it's more live than pre-recorded, only because of my time. I actually took a second job to get the money to come here. So I'm teaching at night. I'm doing a full-time teaching gig. So I only have weekends now to do anything. So I can get more done live than I can recording, editing, and uploading. So.
Yeah, so we record on Google Hangouts. We do a hangout on air, which will, you know, we can talk like a video conference, and then at the end, you actually have to press a button to say, you know, start, and then it'll record that, and when you stop, then it'll spin it off and send it to YouTube. But we do all ours privately is what we've done so far, including the roundtable stuff and the interview with Mr. Strong. We could do. I've considered. I don't know if we've talked about it. I've considered opening that up so we could have, you know, live before studio audience kind of experience, but haven't got there yet. Would that interest anyone? Anybody?
A live podcast?
So somebody would do that.
Yeah.
But anyway,
yeah, it's working.
I've found that Skype has better audio quality than Google Hangouts does.
Really?
Both audio
Yeah,
and video. We've done a lot of experimenting
We
with
tested
that.
that too. Google has nice controls though, because you
Yeah.
can select somebody to just make sure their display stays on the screen, even if somebody else is talking. Like it's got a lot of nice features Skype does not have. But
we've had kind of mixed experiences. Most of our Skype experience has been with the inside planning stuff, and that has been so terrible with dropouts.
The thing about any of this though is you really should be on a hard wire. Wireless is just it's not ideal.
Wi-Fi's not reliable for any of it.
So if you're going to be recording, especially even that for the video won't notice as much. But if you don't want the audio drops and all the gurgling sounds, a good hardwired connection is crucial. We've tested both, and we found that Skype gets better audio quality. So do you do Audacity or anything like that to record it digitally while you guys are talking? Because then you can have a...
No, I use Audacity to
edit.
editing. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, because I don't have the file right.
Well, if you're on the call with him while you're talking to him.
Yeah, but so what
you
we
could be
do
recording live with Audacity.
Yeah, you could record separately.
Yeah.
So what we do, we spin it. We do the Hangout on air, as it's called, and it records off to YouTube. We do that for the intro and the news and the feedback and the host talk sections. Usually the tech segments I'll record separately. Neil records his game stuff separately.
And that I'll use Audacity.
Yeah.
And then I guess like when we did the Christmas episode, that was a separate recording session, so there's one more piece there. But so what we'll do is we'll record it and it's all private, and so then I'll spin off the MP4 recording, or well usually it's just the audio, so the AAC or option, and then I'll make that available to Neil so he can do the editing. And so it takes him a week or something like that once we've done the recording.
Get it all together.
It's time. Editing is time consuming.
Dead space out.
Adjust levels. It's probably got to be harder audibly because you have to literally listen to everything. Like with video, I can kind of scrub through it and see where I want to get to.
Well, when I record my tech segments, if you could hear them, sometimes it'll be, I'll be talking along and be, okay, Neil, you have to edit.
Yeah. That's your,
so when are we getting the blooper reel?
Yeah, exactly.
And we threw in a blooper reel on one of Steve's videos there, and they've got a lot of response, a lot of positive feedback.
We could do that.
Yeah, I need to start saving it.
I wouldn't do it all the time, but once in a while it's kind of fun.
Once in a while we have to edit out some content that just doesn't need to be public.
Yeah. Should make the cut.
Yeah.
Everybody's got one.
Right, exactly. So, questions, comments from the audience? Anybody got feedback or something they'd like to see on either of the shows or anything like that? Mike looks like he's boiling over.
Question. I don't know if you've already covered it, but for someone looking to get back into the CoCo, it seems, I don't know if you've covered this, it seems a little daunting because there seems to be so many different storage options and things like that. I'm not sure if something can be covered about what the options are. Or
Yeah, well, I mean,
what would be appropriate for what situation?
that might be a good source of tech segment stuff.
Yeah.
You know, drive wire versus CoCo SDC versus some of that kind of
Super
stuff.
ID and all the rest.
Well, Super ID, you can't buy those anymore because somebody's selfish with their production.
No offense. Well, there's a sequel coming out. So.
Wait for the sequel. The other thing, if someone wanted to get back into color computer programming, but assembler was just too much for them, what would be the next best thing?
Yeah. Well, Steve was doing a Teach Yourself Basic segment.
I've started doing a series on. I'm just going through the book, literally just reading the book, getting started with color basic, but other languages, not assembly. So.
Well, I meant for if you want to do something graphical and thing. If you want to write a game and say assembler was too much for you, would you use C Basic? Would you use a certain kind of fork compiler? Things like that.
Well, I mean, yeah, we could do a discussion like that.
I think in episode 9 you mentioned I forget the guy's name, but he's the Naked Assembler guy, and he did the Java Grinder, and
Michael Kuhn.
Michael Kuhn.
Yeah.
But it's really messy.
You should probably talk to. Have you talked to Lee Patterson at all? Guy who did Bouncy Ball? Lee Patterson's here. You should talk to Lee Patterson. He's doing Bouncy Ball and he's writing it in C.
Yeah.
I think I know that.
Yeah. So he's writing it in C, and then he's getting a little bit of assistance on a few assembler routines just to speed up a few things. So I don't think there's I'm not a programmer, but I don't think there's a right answer. I think it's probably a matter of preference. But there are C compilers, there are different assemblers. There's Basic 09. There is
basic compilers.
There's Color Logo. There's DL Logo. There are certainly options.
Well, I mean, that's another question. Do you want to develop on the CoCo or within the emulated CoCo, or do you want to develop offline? Are you developing offline on Linux or versus Windows or Mac, which might be more like Linux, might be more like Windows? I'm not really sure how you're going to do it.
John Strong too. Ask John what he's doing, because I think John Strong's from Strongware doing Bomb Squad. I think he's doing a lot of stuff on the PC, and then he transfers it to an emulator. He's got a whole tool set he's built that runs.
And it definitely is personal preference. Like we're talking to Nick Brentes, he prefers to do everything old school. He wants to do it on the CoCo like he did in the old days, because that's the nostalgia that he likes.
Except for the Amiga, where he does his.
Well, he always did that on the Amiga. He always did that.
He does all the graphics.
I think having an episode where you dig down into the details of some of the compilers or different development environments, I think would be cool.
Yeah.
At least to let people know what's out there, and then let them make the decision based on the personal preferences of how they want it.
Exactly. Last night I went home and I looked online, and C Basic is pretty much the only compiler I could find for the CoCo 3 that generates assembler or binaries. I couldn't find a fourth compiler that also was CoCo 3 compiler.
Well, fourth compilers tend to generate, fourth bytecode or whatever, not actual assembly code.
That's pretty quick.
You could ask Brett Gordon about that. He'd be the one that would know. There was somebody who posted a GitHub link recently with some kind of fourth compiler written in Go, of all things. But I didn't make heads or tails of it, but Brett seemed to think that it was a noble effort. Yeah. So
I would not recommend Boise's special compiler, though, to write games.
Yeah.
It's a long story.
It'll mess with your brain, let's put it that way.
We'll have to do an interview segment with you on writing stuff in that. We might lose our general.
I don't even know how to write stuff in that language. I just know how to write the interpreter.
Yeah, I'll just throw it out there for anybody who's here in this room right now. I would like to do an interview with anybody about anything. So anybody who wants to talk about anything with the CoCo, I don't care if you're quote unquote famous or not, because I feel like I say, I can never get tired of hearing about this kind of stuff. So as we're walking around the room and I'm hearing people talk about their projects and their stories, I'm a junkie for this stuff. So anybody who wants to talk about this stuff at any given time, I'd love to hear from you. And if you want to put it on YouTube, we can do it on YouTube, and just reach out to me and let me know. And love to talk about anything that has to do with the CoCo.
Well, that's something several podcasts that do listener interviews.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Where they interview their own listeners, which seems a little odd, but in some ways, but it can be fun to listen to. And like I say, if you want to be on air, if you want to talk, if you want to give feedback on your own terms, you can record your own thing. Mike recorded some stuff for us. It doesn't have to be praise. It doesn't have to be criticism either. You could just do your own. Hey, I recorded this thing on Bouncy Ball or whatever. And
we'd like to hear that.
and but the interview question is something Boise in particular keeps pressuring us for more interview stuff. We've done we did the round table at Christmas. We've done John Strong. I'm not sure we've done any other interviews. I think we would like to, but we get overwhelmed with the news and everything else that we don't want to do many 5-hour episodes.
Bjork.
What's that?
How about Steve
Bjork? Yeah, I'm not sure if he'll talk to me since that thread last year where I posted about who's my favorite programmer. But he did have to approve my permissions to edit the Glenside's site stuff. So. I guess we're on okay terms, but...
He gave you a password?
Yeah, he gave me a password.
But I know, like, as far as interviewing, like you said, fans and stuff, too, like, one of the interviews we got coming lined up here is a person that had a CoCo back in the day, doesn't actively use it anymore, but he had some favorite games, and he was just a game player. He didn't do too much programming, and he's actually a professional podcaster and makes his living off podcasting. And he's agreed to be on just as a fan of the CoCo for playing games. And
we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons.
I was trying to get Douglas Morgan, who actually is working locally here in Chicago these days, but he's way too busy.
If you could get Ed Klein, it is Ed, right?
For
the
Ready Player One.
Ready Player One guy.
Oh yeah, the guy
cool.
He has Dagger's references.
I still haven't read the book yet. I haven't. I bought it. I got to read it. Yeah. One thing I noticed on the podcast, especially because I went back and started listening on Zero, you got a lot more sound bites in the earlier ones. There's less transitional clips now, because there's more content.
Yeah.
But I like hearing the little things, the little Donkey Kong sounds and the commercials and all that stuff. So I stole that idea from you guys. I'm sure that's a common thing. Podcasts are using the old retro commercials and everything.
If you have sources for any other Radio Shack or CoCo commercials that aren't already popping up on the podcast, send them to us because we'd like to have more.
Absolutely.
We had one from Quebec here recently.
In French one?
Yeah. CoCo do, something like that.
Yeah. Those are the only two words I understood were CoCo and do.
Yeah. But it's so anyway. The podcast is the idea was to bring more people here to promote this event.
I think we succeeded.
I think we have. But it's also to build, the whole thing is about building the community. So it means it's our podcast, it's your podcast. We want it to be something that you enjoy, and we want you to have input to it if you want to participate. We'd love to hear from you. Whether it's
and spread the word, too, for people that aren't as active as this, but still have an interest to it. Even if they don't have one anymore, if they just want to revisit their past.
Whether it's about your projects or about your perceptions of things or your favorite game or whatever. We'd like to hear about it. I think I checked, the episode 11 has like 500 downloads already for like a week ago. Yeah. Pretty impressive. Randy Kindig brags about 1,000 downloads for his podcast, so we want to hit that.
What is the potential? How do people make money doing podcasts? I know you're not in it for the money, but how do you monetize that?
I don't know how you would directly. I mean, I guess you could have paid advertisements or something.
That's usually how, like the professional podcasts, like I've been in Twit and a few others. I mean, it's a $4 million a year empire doing podcasts, and it's all based on advertising revenue.
Yeah. So
where does advertising go when you're listening to the podcast? Or do
they actually have a commercials
play throughout? Okay.
We could get Marlette.
Actually, in Twit's case, they actually have the host read the commercials out. So
okay.
We could have Marlette pay to endorse his newest creations.
Mark needs more exposure.
Yeah. So I don't know.
I mean, in our case, for the interviews, one of the things we tell our interviewers if they're actually producing stuff.
We'll be happy to plug
we'll let you plug for free. We're not going to charge your advertising. So you can tell about upcoming projects, give details, forward to the website, whatever you want to do. So
I also have a PayPal account if anyone would like to submit a contribution. Be happy to take it.
The greatest nation in the world is donation.
That's right. Well, let's see. Well, actually, we're probably a little over time now, so probably should wrap it up. Has anybody got any comments or questions they'd like to finish up with?
Keep up the great work.
That's right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
After these messages.
We'll be right back.
Hello. This is the CoCo Crew Podcast technical segment. I'm Tim Lindner, filling in for John Linville. The Color Computer speech and sound cartridge allows your computer to speak.
It can.
Yeah, but keep quiet until I'm ready for you.
Okay.
The SPO256 chip inside the cartridge contains the circuitry to emulate the human vocal tract. It has a mathematical model that takes noise and tone generators and filters it in the same way your throat, tongue, mouth, and lips filter the sound from your vocal cords. The AL2 ROM contains programs to modify the coefficients over time to produce allophones. These are then assembled into the consonants and vowels.
A-D-I-O-U.
Stop it.
Sometimes Y.
Ahem. Before you begin using the device, you must switch the Color Computer's sound mixer to route cartridge audio through the TV. Then, in its simplest mode, you send ASCII characters to address FF7E. After a carriage return, it'll convert the ASCII characters to a string of allophones. So, HELL and O becomes...
Hello.
Very good.
Thank you. Unfortunately, HDY becomes T.
Well, text-to-speech is hard.
Very hard.
Sometimes you could misspell a word to correct its pronunciation.
H-A-Y becomes J.
Good catch, SSC.
I try.
Another way to produce speech is to fill buffers with text or allophone codes.
What are buffers?
Well, you contain 2048 bytes of RAM, and we can fill that RAM with strings of codes to be triggered at a later time.
What is wrong with text-to-speech?
It takes time for your microprocessor to convert text to speech, so triggering speech instantly can be useful.
Like for games?
Yes, exactly. Games can need instant reaction to keep the action moving.
How big are these buffers?
Each buffer is 64 characters, and there are 8 of them for allophones.
And 8 more for text.
Right, but triggering text buffers will invoke a delay while text-to-speech is being calculated.
How many allophones are there?
The AL2 ROM in your SPO256 contains 63 allophones. They were chosen specifically for English speech.
So I can build up these allophones into words?
No, SSC, not you. The programmer gets to do that.
Oh.
Come on, man, cheer up.
I do not know. All this speaking is making me tired.
Well, you can also make sounds.
Like Michael Winslow?
Yes, in fact a lot like him. Your sound chip, the AY38913, can do a whistle. And an explosion.
Hey, I could go on to our...
Dial it back a little, SSC.
40.
In addition to effects, you can also make lovely tones. Give me an A. Give me a C sharp. Give me a D. Now all 3. Whoa, never mind.
That one is on you.
Yes, indeed. Very sorry.
I suppose there are buffers so my programmer can pre-program the notes into me.
Yes, there are 2 ways to program your sound generator. One involves choosing one of the 13 hardware sound registers and then writing a value to it.
A 2-step process.
Yes, a little cumbersome. Some programmers are turned off by this interface because you don't get to pound on the registers directly. You must go through your microcontroller.
I don't like the sound of this pounding.
On other computer systems where the sound generator is directly connected, there is a little more freedom to make the chip you have really shine.
But at what cost?
13 memory addresses and the circuitry to decode them. With your microcontroller, you only use 2 addresses on the CoCo's bus.
So in exchange for simpler decoding, my programmers get instant playback of stored data.
Yep. Seems like a nice trade-off. Plus, we get text-to-speech.
Personally, I think that bit is overrated.
You would say that.
You said there were 2 ways to make sounds.
Yes, there is a 4-byte packet of information that can completely describe any one of the 3 channels: frequency, volume, and duration. And a 3-byte packet if you want that channel to play noise.
And a 4-byte envelope packet.
Yes. Here is a C note increasing in volume with no envelope. Here is a C note increasing in volume with a sawtooth envelope. Sharp.
No, just a regular C note.
Well, that's pretty much everything. You're a whole nother computer inside that little cartridge.
It sounds like I have great power.
You do. Don't let it go to your head.
Okay, I won't.
Let the Radio Shack TRS-80 put the world of color computing into your home. Instant loading program packs turn any color TV into an exciting game arcade. And there's more. The color computer is an educational aid, a home management tool, an up-to-the-minute electronic information service. The programmable, expandable TRS-80 color computer from $399 only at Radio Shack, the biggest name in little computer.
And for our next feature on this episode, we'd like to present CoCo Fest 2016 Retrospective. Please enjoy.
All right. Well, so this is a very free-form thing. You know, we had a round table for a Christmas episode. So if you listen to that or were part of that, it's just sort of a chance to go around and just, you know, talk about what you think or whatever. In this case, I'm talking about the this year's CoCo Fest. So as we're recording this, we're about 3 weeks past CoCo Fest 2016. I, for one, think it was one of the best, possibly the best CoCo Fest that I've ever been to. That doesn't mean there were no problems, but I was very pleased by the big turnout, and I thought we had an excellent, just top-notch lineup of speakers and topics. I know in terms of economics, the Glenside coffers are full. So, despite maybe there's a little mix-up here and there on some charges, they are roughly even for the event, and so that's a good thing. And anyway, I just wanted to get back into, we're starting our what we're thinking of as our new year or our new season for the CoCo Crew. I want to do the whole purpose of the CoCo Crew podcast really was to drive people to CoCo Fest and keep people excited about the CoCo in general. And so I'd like to claim a little bit of victory there. I think we had a success on that point. But so let's talk about it and then just see, well, was it a good fest? Did everybody else enjoy it? And what did you like about it? What are the surprises? And, what should we do for next year? So is everyone still with us?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got on the phone, we're being joined, of course, with Neil Blanchard. We've got the infamous Mr. Boise Pete. We've got his sidekick, Ben Anding.
Howdy.
We've got John Mark Mobley, who's very involved in the organization side of the CoCo Fest. We've got Tim Lindner, who's been a member of the CoCo community for a long time and has done a lot of early media work that maybe indirectly inspired the CoCo Crew later. I know Tim's been around for a while, does a lot of cool stuff. He's come back to us this year with some printing projects for the boxes that I am using and John Strong is using. So that's been a cool contribution. And of course, we've also got Lee Patterson, who is a relatively newcomer to the community, but has been doing some active code development. So I think we've got a nice broad range of perspectives. Everyone on the call, of course, went to CoCo Fest, and a couple of them are first-timers, and like I said, we've got some old-timers. So I think it's a good mix. Is anyone pounding to be first to talk about it, or do I need to pick someone?
Pick one.
How about Lee? You still with us, Lee?
Yeah, well, I was actually hoping you'd pick me last so I can actually hear what everyone else says.
Well, we can do that.
Well, yeah, come back to me. This is I'm still fairly new to the CoCo community, but I'm really liking it. So yeah, come back to me.
Okay. Well, how about John Mark? Are you out there? You there?
Well, I think I'm going to jump in, John, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I definitely want to say by far the best fest I've been to. I've been going since 2010, and this was just phenomenal. And I can kind of gauge it on the CoCo Fest blues, I guess you can call it, and you're heading home, and the week after, a couple weeks after, you really feel it. This one I'm feeling it the most.
It's so good it kind of hurts to let go.
Just it's a great time, but it just every year we say it just goes by too quick. It almost needs to have another day.
It needs more like another 5 days.
But that was one of the things I liked about this year is there were people in the lobby Friday night. People stayed up late Saturday hanging out and talking. So it wasn't technically any longer, but I think we've made more of it than has been made of CoCo Fest in a few years in the past. Not everybody, hid at 5 o'clock.
There were people up late on Friday as well. Friday night, Saturday night. I'm not sure about Sunday because I had to duck out pretty much after the CoCo Fest.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was people Sunday night. I was down there with Mark, and we were there at least midnight.
Pretty cool stuff. Ben, are you out there? I'm wondering, you are kind of a newcomer to the community. You certainly had some influence from Boise. Just wondering, this is your first CoCo Fest. Did it meet all your expectations?
Yep, the best CoCo Fest I've been to so far, of course. All the expectations and more. Got to meet a lot of the personalities that I've come to know and love from the CoCo list, as well as the Facebook group, and let's not forget the podcast and YouTube channels as well. Stevie, he's a good guy. I want to say that I don't know if Lee was up. That was Friday night, must have been. Stayed up late talking about the joystick interface and just computing in general.
I was up, but no, I wasn't part of that discussion.
Oh, that was an interesting one. I kind of commented. I don't know who made that, but it was a very cool thing. It goes from the interface, the CoCo joystick, to USB.
Yeah, then that was Jason Lee Steer. He's actually he's in Australia, if I'm not mistaken.
That's a cool product.
So that's a pretty cool project. Like you say, it accommodates the people who are comfortable using emulators, but want that one little bit of real hardware in their hands, which is pretty cool.
And that's just CoCo Fest was full of great projects. It was wonderful.
There were a lot of cool projects and some nice new products. Of course, we've talked about the stuff I've had and the stuff John Strong had. Neil had the joystick adapters. Mike Rowan had his CoCo on. It's a pretty cool little device that I managed to avoid buying, not on purpose, but just kind of so overwhelmed with the event I forgot to buy one. Boise, I know you got the CoCo on. You were trying to get to say something else, right?
Yeah. I was working with that. So I bought that product. It's actually a very, very cool little device, in my opinion.
And so that's the kind of thing I love too, because I mean it's a little bit goofy, right? I mean it doesn't serve a huge purpose. It's more just for fun. But it is something, and it is there is a certain amount of technical know-how involved in producing it, and it's kind of emblematic of something you do for a hobby, So I like that project. That's pretty cool. Tim, you've been to CoCo Fest in the past, but not for a while. What did you think of this year? How did it compare to years past?
Well, I think this year was very exciting and a lot of fun. I think the extracurricular activities outside of the hours of the fest were fantastic. I really liked to see the lobby action in the hotel. I would suggest to definitely try to stay in the hotel if you can. You'll have much more fun, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and that's the funny thing. This year it was the first time I think we actually sold out of the reserved rooms, or at least the first round of reserved rooms. They had to go and get some more reserved rooms. I think we might have still had some of the second round available, but and it was like I think it was about 30 rooms. So you know.
I know I reserved around December time, so just to make sure.
Yeah. So I mean, that was like I say, it was really exciting to see all those folks there, and you know, in the past years too, there's been some kind of every year it seemed like there's been some sort of youth sporting event scheduled the same weekend, and so we always end up sharing the lobby with a bunch of teenage softball players or something like that, or soccer player. I don't know exactly what sport, but for whatever reason this year they didn't seem to be there, so it was kind of extra cool that we could sort of dominate the place with our geeky old men.
Well, speaking of the venue, I think it was very fitting that we were all in a basement.
Yeah, well, it is kind of a cool location in some respects. I personally am not super fond of the basement, but it is kind of cool to be tucked away and you know, you kind of sort of like most of us probably have a place at home that we crawl into and call our cave. So
near the cafeteria, can't complain.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. So anyway, so John Mark, did you ever get back to the microphone? Are you out there? It looks like he unmuted, but I can't hear you.
Oh.
No, now I can hear you.
You were asking about what we liked about the fest this year. I was most impressed with the 3D printing things, the cartridges that Boise.
I think we might have lost them.
Yeah, John Mark, are you still there? Well, maybe he's dialing in from the library where the Glenside folks meet.
Well, I can take my turn while he's figuring out his audio difficulties.
Okay.
I was I'm new to this CoCo Fest, this year's CoCo Fest, and any CoCo Fest. I really wish I would have been able to do this kind of thing when I was a lot younger. Would have got me a lot more socialized and excited about other people in the CoCo stuff. But the best part of the fest for me was meeting everyone. Definitely, love putting people or faces to people, and seeing what other folks did with their hardware and software. I wish I could have been able, like I said, I wish I would have been able to do this when I was a lot younger. So overall, I think the CoCo Fest was really great. I got to demonstrate bouncy ball. Feedback was fantastic. Everyone loved it. So yeah, definitely looking forward to the next one.
Yep. Well, that's cool. Very exciting. So they have set a date for the next one, so it looks like it's at least in plan for now. That's you know, it's always the last one, of course, but it looks like they've already set the date, tentatively at least, for next April 22nd and 23rd. Probably at the same location, but you know, keep your ears open for now, and just in case something changes. But
has it always been where it was this year?
No, it's been at the current location 4 years. I think it's 4 years. Before that, it was at a hotel in Elgin, which is a bit farther out from Chicago proper. And it was there at that hotel for, it seemed like 8 or 9 years, maybe it was 7 or 8. And then there was another hotel in Elgin before that was, well, not quite as nice. But it was there for a number of years as well, and I don't know what it was beyond 2001, which was the first time I went. But anyway, it does move around a little bit. There is some talk of moving it, depending on changes in management with the Heron Point location and or changes in price or what else is available. I don't know. What do you think of the location? You guys like Heron Point?
I for one liked it. Easy to get to.
Good place.
Yeah. Boise, you like Heron Point, I think.
I'm a huge fan of Heron Point.
Yeah, because it's got the Jimmy John's across the street.
Exactly.
I got through though the pizza, the Chicago style pizza that we ordered. Not so good.
No.
No.
Careful.
Where did that come from?
I can't remember the name of the restaurant. I mean, it could very well have been the restaurant, and maybe it's safer to blame the restaurant. But I mean, the sausage, it kind of tasted like it was dehydrated sausage that was rehydrated. It just, yeah. And the thing was, there was too much pizza kind of thing. Just I like the basic crust with a few toppings on it and lots of cheese.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. The first few times we went out to CoCo Fest, my wife and I would say, oh, let's get some of that deep dish Chicago-style pizza. And we go to different places and say, yeah, we'd like some of that deep dish pizza. And say, oh, no, you don't want that. That takes forever. And it's like, well, actually, that's just kind of what we wanted. And then, no, they kind of talk you out of it. And finally found... some place that made it and it was fine or whatever, but they were right. It did take forever. But
it was almost a good hour before the delivery guy came.
Yeah. Well, it's maybe it's I don't really know. Maybe it just is. The CoCo Fest isn't held in an Italian section of the Chicago area. Maybe it's a Polish section or something like that. So maybe they're not real Italian restaurants. How's that for starting a fight?
I don't know, but that Mexican place we went to is pretty nice.
Yeah, that was not a bad place. So we went. What was it called?
Julian's.
Uncle Julio, something like that.
Yeah, Uncle Julio's. That's it. Yeah.
That's where we went for our Sunday night meal after party or whatever. Yeah, that wasn't bad. And it looked like there was another group that went off. Where did they end up? Because
Fuddruckers.
Well, did they go to Fuddruckers, or did Tony get his way and they not go to Fuddruckers? Anyone know?
I think they did.
Okay. It looked like they had a good time. So I don't know. It's a good event for a lot of socializing, a lot of friendly people. Does anybody regret going? No?
I regret not knowing about it earlier.
Yeah, it's one of those. I mean, sometimes I'll admit, sometimes that first day or two afterwards, it's like, man, that's a long way to drive and go out there, But it must be kind of like having a baby, The woman has a baby and she's, oh my God, what did I do to my body? I'm never doing that again. But then a few months later, they're looking at their infant and say, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. I've got to have another one. So.
How many children do you have, John?
I've got 3. Maybe CoCo Fest is like that, where it's like, well, it is kind of a lot of trouble to get there, but the memories are such that you want to do it again. What do you think, Ben? Do you want to go again?
Definitely.
Yeah, you count on seeing you there next year with a new project, or the finishing up of the project you're working on now.
Hopefully, it'll be in cartridges by then, and then I'll.
What's Ben working on?
You want to say, Ben?
Let's keep it a secret until next CoCo Fest.
Okay. Let's just say he has an interesting adventure-oriented game in development.
Nice. Hopefully it's Dungeons of Daggerrath 2.
Castle of Theragrad 3D. Well, there's some big monsters in there. So John Mark, did you ever get your audio straightened out? I'd like to hear from you.
Oh, he was on video and then he dropped off. Oh, there he is.
Oh, okay. I was most impressed with the ability to make cartridges, both with what Boise had done and what John Strong had done with the 3D printer. That to me, like, if we can make cartridges today, we'll be able to make the entire case for the CoCo in the future.
Well, maybe so. But yeah, no, we've talked about the injection molded cartridges, which I think are just fantastic and fine. And I've got a huge box here of them if anybody wants to buy some more. And I have to admit, at first when I heard that John Strong was going to do the 3D printing on his, I thought he was being a little obstinate, insisting on using the 3D printed ones. But then when I saw what he did, and actually, having the 2-color inlaid design and the custom shaped boxes or whatever, so I kind of relented to say, oh well, okay, that is pretty cool.
Very nice cartridges.
Yeah. So, have any of you guys opened your John Strong box?
Oh, that's a good subject. Who's opened what so far? I haven't opened anything.
Yeah, so I haven't opened mine either, just mostly because I've been buried in other stuff. But I assure you it will be opened at some point. I'm not going to hold it unless it somehow gets lost under the rest of my pile of stuff.
Now, the only things I've taken out of the package is my speech sound pack and my orchestra card, which I've been having an absolute blast playing with.
Oh, yeah. I like the Orchestra 90. If you have an interest in music, it's kind of cool to be able to sit there and compose tunes and have them played back, and you can mess with them and do things. And it's music for a programmer. It's got a little the language or whatever is suitable for a programmer. It's kind of like the musical version of LaTeX, if anybody else ever uses LaTeX to do documents.
I have not. I actually don't have. I don't have a musical bone in my body. But really, what I've actually been using it for is a stereo sound card. So I'm experimenting with multiple voice and stereo sounds on to put in my games, and so far it's been working great. Simon's been helping out, and he's just been going crazy. He's mostly working on the speech sound pack, which I'm totally grooved on as well. But it's really cool. I mean, I actually created a MIDI file in GarageBand, which is not actually so easy. You gotta make your track, save it, run this program to pull the MIDI. Create a loop, save the loop, run this program through it to get the MIDI file out of it, and then I sent it over to Simon, which he then converted it into another format, compiled it into a binary, sent it back, and then I actually heard it playing on the CoCo.
Cool. Very exciting.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to experimenting with sound and music on the CoCo, because the games that I had played back in the day just didn't really have anything special with the sounds.
Yeah, well, that's a shortcoming of a lot of CoCo games, is either the lack of sounds or at least the limited, make noise while everything freezes and then go on, which maybe is suitable to some games more than others.
It's nice to see new games take advantage of that hardware.
Yeah, it definitely is. So, but before we get too far afield, back to CoCo Fest. So, was there anything? I guess we've sort of covered what we liked. Is there any downsides to the CoCo Fest? Any things that we could suggest for improvements and such? Maybe Boise has some ideas.
Well, you didn't ask me about what I liked. I will say that I've been going to CoCo Fest since the first one in 1992 that they had. The first annual, last one.
Yeah.
And, of course, back then there were a lot more people going. But back then the CoCo was on its descendancy, right? The machine was canceled by Tandy. There was a sense that at that point one of those other machines would take over, which they didn't. So it seemed like the community kind of lulled and went back and forth between this resignation of the fact that the machine was never going to make it to trying to bounce back to making new products. And there were some new products in those times. But I think that this fest really represents an inflection point, because up to this point, really for the last 5 or 6 fests, it's felt more like there was a just kind of a holding on or a lingering. This fest really had a lot of energy that I haven't seen in probably the last 6 or 7 years that I've been going. And, of course, I think in part, John, that's we have to give you and Neil credit for touting the fest on the podcast as much as you guys did. I think you guys played a big part in helping the attendance and drumming up the excitement for the fest. So in that sense, I think the fest was an absolute great success. If I had any criticism about the fest, I guess it would be at the beginning of the fest, there was a little bit of confusion of the table layout. And, these things happen. I know everybody's busy and so forth, but hopefully next year the organizers can be a little bit more on top of that particular problem. There was some confusion about who took whose table, or if someone did indeed take one's table or not. And I believe that's all been sorted out now. Those misunderstandings have been fixed. Beyond that, I don't really think there was anything else, to criticize. Certainly, the fact that we had access to the room Saturday night was a big bonus, and I commend Glenside for doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, as far as some of that confusion, I think they really were a bit surprised by the attendance. I think they were planning a little bit larger attendance. I think they thought that the 25th anniversary would bring in some extra folks, and maybe it did. I'm not sure they expected as much of an increase as they got. So we may have caught them a little bit on their heels on that, but I think they coped with it reasonably well. So you're talking about the Saturday night. That was sort of a new feature for Heron Point, although it's sort of a return of the way we did things at the site in Elgin, of having access to the site on Saturday night. What was new this time was bringing in catering for the evening meal on Saturday, which I personally thought the food was pretty good, and even if it wasn't necessarily exactly what you wanted, I thought it was really cool to have a chance for everyone to kind of stay together and socialize and break bread together and that sort of thing there on site. What did you guys think? Did you stay for the evening meal? Did you enjoy it, Tim?
Yeah, I thought the meal was great. It was fun to eat with everybody, and it's really hard to, with so many people coming and going, it's really hard to see everybody, and being able to sit down with a group of people was really fun.
Yeah, no, I thought it was pretty cool. Excuse me. What about, I don't know, Neil, Lee, what did you guys think?
Well, I thought it was great to have the meal there. It gives you a chance to see other people you might not see. Because when you take off and you go in your own groups, that's time you're away.
Yeah, I think my only criticism would have been that not being able to have lunch with everyone at the location. So I think the catered food was a very good idea, and I think lunch on. I think it was Saturday that everybody took off for lunch, doing their own thing. If everyone was actually in that lunchroom together, would have been awesome.
Wow. So yeah, that would be cool. I don't know if anyone's going to take on a catered lunch, but that would be a cool thing for the suggestion box.
And I'll agree with you.
What the only other thing actually that I'd mention, I had a hard time with the website. It wasn't updated. There was still a lot of 2015, and at the beginning, when I was just getting interested in the this year's CoCo Fest, it was confusing because I didn't know if it really was going to happen or if it wasn't happening, or who all was going and that kind of thing.
Yeah. The website, there was somebody who's responsible for some of that had some personal issues that kind of distracted him. Anyway, they eventually got that transferred off. I took on some of that along with John Mark and maybe a couple others, but I think we got it straightened out pretty well by the time we actually got to the fest. But I didn't get the right permission until the Monday or something before the fest, so we didn't have a lot of time to clean that up. So that was a little touch and go. Hopefully, maybe we can keep that straighter next year. I will say everybody was very complimentary of the trivia game on Saturday night. That was Boise's brainchild. I thought that was a big success.
Well, that was fun.
And everyone liked the trivia?
Trivia was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it still blows me away that there are people that know the Radio Shack catalog number of the CoCo 3.
That's so 26-3334. Is that right?
Well, I can tell you the one for the speech sound pack is 26-3144A.
I call cheater. It must be right in front of you.
Yes, it's right in front of me.
Oh, Lord. Well, Ben, what was your favorite part of the fest?
Well, there's a lot of good food to be had.
To be a young man again.
As I said,
That's the one who weighs the least of all of us.
Yeah, seeing all the cool projects was really the best part. Walking the floor and seeing just how active the community is, because there's a lot that I saw that I didn't know about, maybe because I just don't read the list often enough, but a lot of the disc games, I didn't have a huge, I didn't learn a lot about discs until the fest. I didn't actually get to play with too many like disc controllers or the cables or any of the games, so getting to play with those was fun. I just never had the materials.
Didn't you pick up a disc drive actually, Ben, at the fest?
Yes, I did. A very nice one. A Cadillac TIAC.
Right. You need a disc controller, as I recall, right?
I did get the disc controller. I'm just in the process of making a cable now.
Cool. Awesome.
Never played disc games. Thanks for making me feel old, Ben.
Yeah, no kidding. Did you have to wrestle the disc drive out from Jim? He's one of his. He's the big disc collector or whatever.
Yeah,
Jim O'Keefe.
Right there.
You got to watch Neil too. He's big on discs and cassettes and CRT monitors. He's a purist.
Yeah.
How can anyone enjoy cassettes?
Well, it can be fun. I don't know. It's fun if they work. That's the main thing. They're also pretty handy. The cassette port is pretty handy when you can plug it into your cell phone or whatever. That way you don't have to carry much else.
Yeah, you learn to sing along with the tune.
I had lots of that on my pocket computers. That was we'll say a lot of fun.
Listen, there's nothing like hearing the devil screech.
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of the devil's screech, how about Tony as the auctioneer? Sorry for the segue. Did you guys enjoy the no minimum bid auction? What did you think of that, Lee?
I didn't actually take part in it, but it was certainly fun watching people bid on things.
You didn't buy anything in the auction?
I did not. I was careful on what I purchased, and I got everything that I wanted. Although I was sorely tempted by that CoCo 3 that went.
That was really expensive, wasn't it?
That was. I think that was like $34 over retail in 1986 or something like that. But,
that was Jim Brain, I guess, bought that, right?
Yeah. He still got a. I'd still say it was a damn good deal, but yeah, it was fun watching nothing go.
Now, so Lee, you drove though, right, from Maine?
I did. Hopped in my car, loaded up with goodies, and drove there. It was what was it, 16 hours, I think it was.
Oh my goodness!
And then after that, we went over to Wisconsin Dells to visit some family. So it worked out really well. I think my wife played her cards just right. She was like, "Okay, so what kind of things are happening in the area around that time?" And oh look, we can also visit my parents.
Well, that's kind of cool. That's actually kind of the reverse of how I ended up at PinFest, which was the first fest I went to before going to CoCo Fest. It was the PinFest 2000 was in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, which just so happened to be the town where my mother-in-law lived, and we arranged to go up there, and it was kind of close enough that I nudged it just so that we'd be there at the right weekend or whatever, and took off and went to go see what it was all about after having read about the various fest activities for years, and always thinking, man, I like my CoCos, but man, those guys that go to CoCo Fest, man, those guys are crazy. But then I went, I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. These people doing this weird stuff with their CoCos, and you can get good deals on stuff, and you can get products that are hard to find or hard to get a hold of elsewhere, and just get other weirdos that like to talk about the same crazy stuff that I do.
Absolutely. I have a question for the group. How different did this CoCo Fest feel from like the earlier days when there's like all the expensive vendors and whatnot?
So my days date back to 2000 and PinFest 2000 and 2001. At those days, it was definitely the beginning of the managed decline, if or maybe already into the managed decline. There were a few more people there that had still had leftovers from the good old days that they were still trying to sell, but those have weaned off. But so in terms of all that, it's certainly, as Boise said, it was an inflection point. It was a turnaround from managed decline to, hey, we're kind of into this stuff. Let's have some fun with it. So it really felt like a big difference to me. But I'll let anyone else give their opinion.
Well, I'll say that for me, it was, since I've been going probably to CoCo Fest longer than anybody here, you don't get because you had the numbers back then, Lee, that, hundreds of people on the show floor at one time. It was almost organized chaos. At today's fest, it's much more easygoing, nice flow. You can walk from table to table. You're not overwhelmed with the number of tables. I think back in the early days of the fest, and even back to the Rainbow Fest days, which I never did attend, they were, on the order of 50 to 60 different vendors. So you can imagine, John, you forgot to pick up one thing. Just imagine if we had, 3 or 4x the number of vendors. So it's a lot more relaxed and enjoyable, I think.
It is. Like you say, it's relaxed. And it's kind of a different, there's nobody there that's really trying to make any money. There's some of us who, we have things for sale. Some who are a little more charitable than others maybe in wanting to get their things out, but for the most part, no, there's nobody there actually trying to make any money off you. They're offering you something for sale as basically out of camaraderie for someone else who's interested in the same goofy thing they are. And whether that be my cartridges or Mike Rowan's CoCo On thing or whatever else is out there, Neil and his joystick adapters. Definitely a work of love there. So it's a different, it's not as commercial. I'm not necessarily anti-commercial by any means, but it is more of a group of hobbyists than a group of people trying to make their livings. So that's cool.
Yeah, it definitely had more of a club feel as opposed to a large event feel. Like those large events, I've gone to the PAX events out east, and with so many vendors and so many people and huge lineups, and you never actually talk to anybody. Whereas at the CoCo Fest, I actually got to talk to people and met some friends, and it was awesome.
Speaking of other events, so I know Boise has been to some VCF events, as have I. Perhaps maybe Tim has. I know Neil's been to one. How would you guys contrast CoCo Fest versus, say, a generic event like VCF?
Well, when I went to the VCF West 5 years ago, I found them very similar. There were more people at the VCF event, but I found the presentation room to be very similar tables set up, people meandering through looking at things. And then there was a separate area for presentations where people were giving talks. I found it quite familiar.
Wasn't the VCF also, they're not as big on selling, right? That's one of their things, although I guess they don't.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The VCF East and I think the VCF Southeast both have um, consignment areas where you're supposed to let them handle the selling, and I guess that maybe they take a cut or whatever. So that's a bit different. CoCo Fest, you buy direct from the people on the floor if they're selling something. CoCo Fest, Glenside makes their money off of the auction.
Right. Speaking of that, did you hear this? I caught Tony doing the auction. Did you hear this?
I don't quite remember that.
That would be hilarious.
I had a great time at the auction. I got a lovely bit of kit that I really am impressed with. The Digisector DS69. I think, in fact, I was bidding against you, John.
Yeah, well, I was interested in the manual. I actually have one, I think, but no manual. So I think I gave up reasonably early and didn't drive it up too much on you.
All for a good cause.
Yeah, that's a cool item, and it's amazing that the CoCo could handle that at all. I've even run it's got the mode where it displays the live picture or whatever. You can even run video through it to some extent, and it'll kind of keep up.
Yep.
And so it's kind of cool.
Is that what you used for making your profile picture there, Tim?
No. My profile picture is a Atkinson Dizzard picture that I did about 20 years ago on Mac.
Nice.
So if anybody's interested, you look up Atkinson dithering. It's a very special process.
Oh, man. It actually kind of looks like Boise's picture here on my... no, anyway. All right, well, so something that's come up, I hate that we're having problems with John Mark's audio.
Because he's... hear me, can't you?
I can hear you a bit.
Okay.
So, John Mark, you kind of have pushed the notion a little bit of trying to bring in the TRS-80 folks to maybe as like have a section of CoCo Fest or something like that. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, the TRS-80 Trash Talk podcast has started up, and they've expressed an interest in having their own fest. And I thought maybe they could show up to a CoCo Fest and see what kind of crowd they could draw, and then branch off and do their own separate fest. It's kind of expensive to put on a fest, and so you need about $2,000 to have a decent fest, and you probably have to start out small and build up rather than borrow $2,000 and start. So I don't know, but somehow I think they're going to do it. They have twice as many computers as we have CoCos, so they should have no trouble getting an interested crowd.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm not sure that they are going to join CoCo Fest per se, but they have expressed interest in having their own event, or we've also tossed around the idea of maybe having a new broader Tandy event that would bring in both the CoCo and the machines that they deal with, like the Model 1, 3, 4, and the Model 2, 12, 16, 6000, and maybe the Pocket computers, and maybe even the Tandy 1000 line.
That sort of auction would take forever.
Yeah, well, that auction might be a bit big. So
I don't know. You had to go with the Tandy 1000. No.
You don't like the Tandy 1000?
That was the downfall of the CoCo.
Well, definitely have heard that expressed from time to time. But even so, the people who bought them weren't necessarily trying to kill the CoCo. They're just old geeks like us, maybe not quite as old. Maybe they're Neil's age, or maybe they're Ben's age.
Well, admittedly, it was the first computer that I played King's Quest 3 on.
Yeah.
So it's not all bad.
Yeah. I thought it might be fun to port Farfall to it, but I hadn't got around to that yet either. At least I could use my custom Farfall joystick.
That joystick, I gotta say, I was jealous of your joystick there.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, did you say you had the specs posted online?
I've got a schematic for it. It's online. I can send it to you if. I think it's on my Retro Tinker blog, but I can send it to you if you can't find it.
Absolutely.
Neil used the schematic to build his replica version. That he used the frame from some kind of like a cassette case or a cassette storage box.
It's a wooden tape crate. It works well.
It looks pretty cool. It's like an open frame joystick.
Yeah. You can see all the wiring inside.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Now that schematic, you added the second button in that one, though.
Yeah, the second button's in there. Yeah, so I mean, it's not just for Farfall. I mean, it could be for anything up to a CoCo 3 with the second button, and it's a different schematic than, of course, what we're using with the Sega adapter, which is a different circuit. But more than one way to skin the CoCo cat or something like that.
Well, hey, I gotta run. So I will leave the rest of you guys and wait for the podcast to hear the rest of the conversation.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you could join us, Lee.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else got a topic they'd like to touch on or something they'd like to toss around? Neil, what was your favorite game you saw on display at CoCo Fest?
Oh, you're going to do that to me.
Farfall.
Well,
definitely Farfall.
You don't have to say bouncy ball anymore since we got rid of Lee.
Yeah. The only thing I would add, if it's possible, it might not be possible, but for CoCo Fest maybe next year is if we can get in Friday night just to set up. That would get things started on Saturday morning. It wouldn't be that mix-up again.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'd be a charge with that.
That's what I was wondering. John Mark, do you know if they were going to charge us extra for that luxury?
Yeah, they probably would. We're talking about trying to get in there on Friday night just to set up the tables and cover them and to put names on each of the tables and then let people set up on Saturday morning. But
cool. Yeah, and that would address the scrambling around on Saturday morning thing very nicely, I think. But,
well, in the club's defense, we did get in there really early on Saturday morning to be able to set up. I believe it was 7 a.m. is when it could have started.
I don't know. It just is what it is. It was a little unfortunate, but I think we got it straightened out pretty quick. The biggest problem with all that was that it put the rest of the schedule off a bit. So for the talks, I'm trying to get started on that. That's why I went walking around playing music and trying to get people's attention.
Hey, John, I've got a question for you. Given the success of this fest, how can we top it next year?
Well, I mean, it is kind of a question. In fact, that even came up in the Glenside meeting. There was someone expressed the notion that they didn't think we would have as many people next year as we did this year, which I took a little bit of umbrage at. So, I mean, I think there's bound to be some people that were listening that thought about coming to the fest but said, well, they're just trying to drive people there. They may not get anyone. Why waste my time? So there's bound to be a few of those people who have to say, well, they got more people there last year. Sounds like it was a good thing. Maybe we should try it this year. So I think we could probably drive a few more people in that way. I think, the technical talks, I think, were pretty good. If we could keep the level of talks pretty up, entertaining. It'd be great if we had enough talks we could have 2 sessions. I'm not sure how we'd accommodate that with the space, but so you'd actually have to choose, which is both a blessing and a curse, I guess. But you could have one level of talks that was all about putting on Retro Bright or how to glue rubber feet to the bottom of your case or something, and another one that's all about how to solve programming issues and interrupt handlers on OS 9, or two different levels of discussion. That'd be cool. I don't know, but like I said,
those virtual interrupts are a real pain.
But you'd be dividing people's attention there, so it might be that'd be both a plus and a minus. I mean, I'd love to see it be longer if we could actually fill the time. I don't really see a schedule change like that for next year.
I would definitely suggest doing a Friday, starting on a Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be neat. That's never been done in the history of the CoCo Fest, is having a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday event. Wow.
Well, there are people who show up. You get there on Thursday and are there on Friday for their own reasons or whatever, and not all of them are actually going and touring or anything. They're just around. Theoretically, even if Glenside didn't want to support it, I guess if you had whatever you think the critical mass was, 10 or 15 people or whatever, you could show up and have your own auxiliary day. Maybe we could have a CoCo Crew Hack Fest on Friday or something. That'd be kind of cool. Oh, look, there's Mike.
Hey, there he is.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah, I've been listening, but I wasn't able to join for some reason, but now I can.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad you got in now. So I don't know. I don't have any other great ideas for how to make it better other than just get more people to show up and bring their own projects. And I mean, you could do some more stuff. You could have organized contests. We had those organized contests last year, but the organizers didn't even show up to have them, or that was kind of a problem. The 4K challenge or whatever. There was also that Dartmouth Basic contest, but I don't think that had many people that competed since the CoCo didn't run Dartmouth Basic. We could have a logical summit. No, I'm being silly now. Well, Mike, what we had a lot of topics. You probably heard us talking. What do you have to add? What did you like about CoCo Fest? What did you not like? What could we have improved? What are your hopes and dreams for next year?
Well, I certainly enjoyed the energy this year, and I attribute that to the CoCo Crew Podcast. I think there's no doubt that you've driven the community together, because there've kind of been fragmented communities between Facebook, the CoCo list, and others, and it's kind of brought everything together in one place very nicely. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's been great. I know many people enjoy it. Stevie Stroh's got all of his video things that have been taking off, and I think that's directly connected to the podcast as well, even though he's kind of doing it more video style and with a different angle. But I mean, it's been fantastic to see people that have been in the community for a long time but haven't really been vocal or that interactive, really, showing up to Fest. It's great to see people I'd never met in person. I got, even though this first time I got to meet Tim in person, so it was great meeting you, Tim, and to meet Lee and everybody else that to put faces with names was great. It was really great to see so many people at the hotel hanging out Friday night. That was something I've been going since 2010, just like Neil, and hadn't really experienced that level of interaction. That was really nice to see. Great to see it. I think it's really important to have that Saturday night open at Heron Point, because that's, especially if you've got a table at the fest, or you're selling something, or you have a new project, you spend all day explaining it to people and selling it, and it's nice to have a time where you can step away from the table and just interact with people one-on-one and get to see other people's stuff. So
yeah, definitely. I think there was actually somebody provided that as feedback to the Glenside people, that Saturday night was too long and could they cut it an hour or two short. But I definitely pushed back on that and said, no, I thought that Saturday night was great and that we needed all that time to stay part of the event if at all possible.
Yeah, that's really kind of surprising because you don't have to stay, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. Too long, just go back to the hotel.
Exactly. That's what I said. I mean, I understand some people might feel that way and have other things to do, but, you know, a lot of us have traveled a long way. We got nowhere else to be except we came to hang out with each other, so that's what we want to do. Yeah, that was, I think, the biggest improvement to this year's fest was having that extra Saturday night. And then, you know, Boise entertaining us with the trivia was a big improvement there.
Yeah, I agree. The trivia was a lot of fun.
Yeah, the trivia should be done every year from now on.
Yep. And with the same questions.
Yeah. That's going to be the trick, right? Knowing, getting a new pool of questions, which can probably be done.
You have 11 months to study the Radio Shack catalog.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking we should have a segment devoted to CoCo Trivia on the podcast, maybe, or you could have a podcast segment that's like, you know, month-by-month review of Rainbow Magazine or something, and then take all the trivia questions from that. No, that might be fun.
Well, we do have some door prizes now.
Yeah, that's right. Steve Strobridge donated a few of his video DVDs with his anthology of CoCo-related videos and such that he was selling at the fest, and he made a few extra available to Neil and I that we can give away to promote the podcast. We'll have to think of a suitable thing to do there. Not sure what that contest would be. Anybody have suggestions? I know Floppy Days had a contest to design a new logo for them, but I'm kind of still happy with our with our graphics. So,
how about the most? How about writing the most adventurous text adventure? The most ever.
Yeah, that would be cool. One that could pass the ratings board. That'd be that'd be funny. Have to form a new CoCo software rating board. Well, anyway, I'm sure we can think of something. You know, someone was suggesting that we have some sort of robot, what was it called, robot battle? A robot battle contest of some sort. I think that'd be kind of cool. It's a programming challenge, but you know, it's a different language, so nobody has an implied advantage from being a professional at that language or anything. You know, you can just plug it in and run the robots against each other and see who comes out on top.
Is that a network game or something on one CoCo?
No, it's on one CoCo as far as I know. Robot battle.
Color robot battle.
Color robot battle, yeah. It's sort of a cousin to like Core Wars or whatever. It's just it's got its custom language, and robots chase each other around. Released in 1981 by the Image Producers, who were just interviewed yesterday by Steve Strobridge.
1981.
So anyway, we could have a color robot battle contest. We could have a singing contest. Who can sing "I'm in Love with the CoCo" the best?
We've been singing it all week long here.
I don't want to let this drag on too long. Anyone else got any topics or any news developing? Anybody like to share or anything like that?
Well, in August 6th and 7th on the West Coast here, there's going to be a Vintage Computer Festival West that I'm going to be showing off a couple CoCos on.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. In fact, I should add that one to our announcements. VCF West XI. Yeah, so not only has VCF East gained Roman numerals, so has VCF West. The NFL shook off their Roman numerals for Super Bowl, but so they must have been on discount for the VCF. Cool. Is there any? Are you aware of any other CoCo-related displays there? Or?
looking through the exhibit list, and it seems the only CoCo-related thing will be mine. But there's still time for more people to get involved.
Yeah, well, that's cool.
Well, it's good that you're going there, Tim, to represent the CoCo.
Absolutely.
Very good. Yeah, that's at the Computer History Museum.
It will be this year, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, see, they irritated me because they had a dragon on display but no CoCo when I was there. It's like, dude, what's up with that?
I complained as well at my last visit to the museum.
If they need us to donate a CoCo, just let me know. I'm sure we can round something up. Yeah, so definitely need to add that to the announcements. Anything else? Any big projects anyone's working on that they want to share?
I'm looking to get more volunteers to help out with the Glenside Club. You know, people to contribute articles to the newsletter. Bob Swoger's, got a lot of tasks that he's trying to manage, and I think he's looking for somebody that he can begin to teach what he's doing so that when he's gone, someone else can carry the work on. So we're looking for volunteers to, keep the club going.
Cool. Yeah, very important there. Especially if you're in the Chicagoland area, so that you can join the meetings in person. But in any case, you can still join the meetings via Hangouts or Skype or whatever to help keep the club alive and maybe provide a little extra energy in the club. I think is a good thing. Anything else, Boise? You're going to squeeze a CoCo into your dissertation?
That might be pushing it. I already did it for the master's thesis, so I have to go with the Commodore 64 this time.
Oh, that would be funny.
That would be tragic.
Tragic. Farce, whatever. This history repeats itself. First time is tragedy, and second time is farce, something like that.
I just want to say, though, John, thanks for what the CoCo Crew has done for the fest. I think I'll agree with Mike again and state that I think you and Neil have really energized the community. So, great work.
Well, I appreciate you saying so. Like I say, I tend to agree. I like to think that we've had a positive influence. It certainly has been our intent. That's the biggest reason we're here, is to try to well, I mean, I guess at this point, the community is the most important thing. We want to have an active and vibrant community, but I think the health of CoCo Fest is directly tied to the health of the community, and so I definitely want a healthy and vibrant CoCo Fest as a result of having our show, and like I say, keep us all talking to each other and keep the CoCo going forever, or as long as we can manage.
Absolutely.
Well, I think probably that sounds like we need to wrap it up here. So everyone, including Lee, who's already had to depart, Ben, Boise, John Mark, Mike, Tim, of course, Neil, I want to thank you all for participating in the roundtable, sharing your thoughts and opinions, and we'll try not to make you look too bad after the edits.
Thank you as well.
All right. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast. And anyone else have anything they want to say that they want to get in the recording?
I'll just add that everybody should go to CoCo Fest, whether it's the Glenside one or anyone others that comes along, because it's a great experience to meet other CoCo people, and time kind of stands still for the weekend.
That's true. It is. It's a nice way to kind of lose yourself in your hobby, and like I say, it's a nice affirmation that there are other people. I mean, we have kind of a weird hobby. Sometimes it's easy to think, man, why am I doing this weird thing? Nobody understands it. It's just crazy. But it's nice to know there's other people out there that are interested in the same thing and are doing the same thing you are. So it's cool. All right. Well, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast now. The following program could have been produced by a pair of donkeys wearing roller skates.
Welcome back to the Games Corner. First of all, before I get into my selected game review, I would like to take a moment and give a huge shout out to Tim Lindner and Marty Goodman. Why, you may ask? while both of them surprised me big time at this past 2016 CoCo Fest. What happened was Tim was doing a seminar on his new reproduction cardboard CoCo cartridge boxes, which by the way look totally amazing, just like the original ones Radio Shack made back in the day, if not even nicer. After Tim's presentation, he surprised all of us with a video recording he made of Marty Goodman. It was cool to see and hear Marty and listen to the things he had to say. It was almost like he was there with us at CoCo Fest. Then if that wasn't good enough, after the video, Tim called me up on the stage and said Marty would like for you to have something. He handed me over an envelope. Inside it was an original copy of Marty's Nightmare, signed by Marty Goodman himself. I was absolutely speechless. The cool thing is, Tim had remembered back in episode 7, when I had reviewed Marty's Nightmare, I made a mention in there about how great it would be to possibly meet Marty Goodman someday, and how I was really looking for an original copy of this game. A big thank you to Tim and Marty. You made this year's CoCo Fest one I will never forget. That disc to me is a real artifact, and the video of Marty is the next best thing to me meeting him in real life. Thank you. Okay, back to the Games Corner. And speaking of this past CoCo Fest, I will be reviewing a game that was released at CoCo Fest this year. The game is called Bomb Squad, and was coded and produced by John Strong, or under his company name, Strongware. Bomb Squad requires a Color Computer 3 with 128K of memory and a mouse or joystick. I am honored to do a review and mention of this game because I was lucky to be a beta tester. I got to see it in the early stages and progress through. John would send me updates from time to time for testing. Bomb Squad is a Minesweeper clone. Most of you probably know or remember Minesweeper as it was bundled with Microsoft Windows back in the day. And it is still included with Windows, however I do believe on Windows 10 it is a free Microsoft downloadable app and not pre-installed into the OS. The goal of the game is to uncover all the squares that do not contain mines without being blown up by clicking on a square with a mine underneath it. The game features 5 different skill levels: Rookie, Officer, Sergeant, Lieutenant, and Captain. The higher skill level you go, the play field increases. Another cool feature is it keeps a high score report for each different level you are playing on. The high-res CoCo 3 graphics are also crisp and make great use of the colors. You can select between RGB and composite modes. John did an excellent job on this game, from the game right down to the packaging. What makes this Minesweeper clone on the CoCo shine from the others is, for one, it's the first game to make use of the new high-res joystick routines developed by John Kowalski, Nick Morentis, and Robert Galt. This means you do not need to use the old high-res joystick adapter that Radio Shack used to sell to gain full screen resolution. Second, this game is released on cartridge, and as an added bonus, it's a super cool custom 2-color 3D printed cartridge with little bomb-shaped finger grips on the sides. And third, John used Tim Lindner's reproduction cardboard boxes and shrink wrapped them, and even went as far to include a plastic hang tab on them. Now how is that for presentation? These look so good you don't even want to open them. Maybe that was John's plan to sell multiple copies to everyone. He also has or had Bomb Squad t-shirts, mouse pads, and a game poster available for sale at the fest. I'm not sure if he has any of these items left. If you're interested in purchasing this game, John Strong is selling them for $40 plus shipping. If you'd like to purchase this game, please drop him an email. I will make sure the link is in the show notes. Keep up the great work, John. I'm definitely looking forward to your next game release. I hope all of you enjoyed this segment of the Games Corner. Until next month, happy CoCo Gaming.
This episode of the CoCo Crew Podcast is brought to you by the numbers 6, 8, 0, and 9, and the letter E.
Well, I'm sure you guessed it. We have reached the end of episode 12. We hope you enjoyed this episode. It was a little different from our normal episodes, but that's what keeps it exciting. I'd like to thank my host John Linville for taking the time to research and keep track of all the news happenings in the community each month. I really don't know how he does it. And Tim Lindner for providing his tech segment on the Speech Sound Pack. It was cool to have a listener submit their own tech segment this time. I also would like to thank everyone who participated in the 2016 CoCo Fest retrospective discussion, and of course to all of you who listen and support us. Without you, there'd be not much point in doing this podcast. Until next month, CoCo forever.